playing as Tathagata in Marvel, I suppressed Thanos for 500 years. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. 215. Chapter 214, Extraneous Branches. 215. Chapter 214, Unexpected Branches. 2024-11-03 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 214, Unexpected Branches. Ultron shook his head curtly. Thank you for your kindness, Miss Wanda. But I'm a pure robot. Human food is just beautiful to me. Vision has human cells and biological tissues, he can eat it and should like it. Vision agreed. I think Miss Wanda's cooking is very good. Wanda smiled. You haven't tried it yet, so how do you know if it's good? Ultron looked at Vision. Since his return to the world, he no longer used the term donor. This meant that he was no longer the detached bearer of the 9th-rank moral golden lotus, but a mimic who had begun to possess human moral emotions. This was what he hoped for, and what Lin Feng also hoped for. Vision represented the most reliable direction for humanity's development. Unable to eat, Ultron left the kitchen. Police cars flooded the streets of Berlin, Germany, forcing the roads to be temporarily closed, forcing pedestrians to wait patiently. They understood the weight of police duty, especially when facing elusive gods and sudden alien threats. And without such a strong police presence, the safety of the public would be difficult to guarantee. No one was willing to risk their lives at this moment. Sam glanced curiously at T'Challa in the front seat and asked, half jokingly, half seriously, what, do you have a thing for cats? Rogers, noticing something off about Sam's words, quickly stopped him. Sam, don't be like that. Sam, however, was somewhat displeased. He had come to Bucharest both to respond to Rogers' request and to fulfill Lin Feng's mission. Lin Feng had told him that the Winter Soldier had no time to commit the crime and had reformed. He was interested in having Bucky join the Avengers. Black Panther's appearance not only disrupted his and Rogers' plan to rescue Bucky, but also put Bucky in jail. Unable to contain his anger, he said to Rogers, Rogers, don't you think it's strange for someone to dress like a black cat? Rogers didn't answer. He was more curious about the material of T'Challa's clothes, so he asked, are your clothes made of vibranium? T'Challa ignored Sam's provocative comments from the back seat. When he heard Rogers' question, he turned around and answered the question irrelevantly. Black Panther, a natural-born warrior who has protected Wakanda for generations, has been passed down from generation to generation. His voice suddenly turned ice-cold. Now, because your friend killed my father, I have no choice but to inherit the throne. Now, I want to ask you, you are both a warrior and a king. How do you protect your friend? How long can you protect him? Wakandans can spend their entire lives avenging their late king. What about you? Can you protect your friend for the rest of your life? Rogers was speechless. He could sense the intense hostility and unwavering determination in T'Challa's cold tone, knowing his prejudice was deep. Even if he explained that Bucky didn't have the time to commit the crime, he couldn't produce any evidence. Furthermore, he wasn't sure of T'Challa's attitude toward Lin Feng and the gods, and it might backfire. Helplessly, Rogers turned to look out the window. Police cars rolled into the UN Berlin branch, and officers were already waiting to pick up Rogers and Sam. Rogers glanced over. Bucky in the prison van had a complex expression, one of relief and confusion. Following closely behind, Black Panther also glanced over, confirming Bucky's position. The surrounding police officers and soldiers were disciplined, conducting the handover and security operations in an orderly manner, making it seem difficult to attack. Rogers felt a sense of relief when he saw that Bucky had no intention of escaping. He turned around and walked towards a man who looked like a superior. Hello, sir, what are you going to do with him? Logically, you should do the same as him. First conduct a psychological assessment, then extradite him, and finally confirm the charges and execute a punishment. The superior looked at Rogers unfriendly. Sharon explained, this is Mr. Everett Ross, the deputy commander of the task force. Rogers didn't care about his identity, he was more concerned about Bucky. So, he asked, what about his defense lawyer? A lawyer? How ridiculous. Ross scoffed, but didn't answer. Turning back, he ordered, lock up their equipment and keep it safe. It might contain divine gifts. You must treat it with care and don't desecrate it. Then, turning to Rogers, he said, I have great respect for your Avengers leader, Lin Feng. I know he can help you recover the divine gifts. Don't worry, I'll give you a receipt. This is only a temporary withholding. You'll get your things back when this is over." Rogers could tell from his words that Bucky's arrest was so serious that even a defense lawyer hadn't been hired. Of course, no one dared to defend the Hydra killer. Clearing Bucky's name seemed imperative, or else all this effort would be in vain. But did he still have a chance? Was it too late? Bucky has been arrested, and his psychological evaluation is about to begin. How much time does he have left? Rogers, with mixed feelings, turned back again, looking at Bucky with concern. Bucky looked at Rogers, hesitant to speak, but finally smiled. Rogers, staring at Bucky's smile, was momentarily at a loss for words. Near the power plant, a truck loaded with large mail drove toward the maintenance workers' quarters. A bespectacled psychiatrist, escorted by staff, entered the UN Berlin office. This was Dr. Leica, tasked with conducting a psychological evaluation of the Winter Soldier. In an unnoticed corner, a subtle sneer flickered across Dr. Leica's lips. Ross, slightly smaller than the others, walked confidently ahead, leading the way. Following him were three men: an elite Special Forces soldier, a World War II veteran who had endured over 70 years of Ice Age, and a natural warrior. Their burly figures made him appear even smaller. Yet, he exuded a powerful presence, never a hint of timidity, brimming with confidence. He first addressed T'Challa. "We'll arrange an office for you, away from the holding cells." T'Challa scoffed and replied, "I'm not going anywhere." The UN building was packed with special forces, and even though he hated Bucky to the core, he didn't have the opportunity to attack him right now, especially since his equipment was being temporarily impounded. Natasha approached, looking at Rogers first. "You shouldn't be so impulsive," she said. Rogers smiled calmly. "At least I know he's alive, and that's enough." Natasha felt a little helpless, then turned to Sam and asked, "What's going on?" "The professor sent you here to help, not to cause trouble." Sam gave a wry smile and replied, "Plans never keep up." "Well, I'm wrong about that, but don't worry. Our equipment is still being held. And, Mr. Ross, I don't want to see anyone messing around with our equipment later." Ross ignored Sam's teasing and turned, heading back to his office. Natasha led them directly to the room before them. Before the door was fully opened, a voice carrying a telephone call could be heard from within. "Romania is not protected by the convention, but we will do our best to assist the Romanian people. This incident did not cause significant casualties or property damage. Colonel Rhodes and Ms. Hashimoto are assisting with the matter." Lin Feng, still on the phone, looked up. The moment he opened the door, he noticed Natasha and the others outside and gestured for them to find a seat until he was done. The operation in Bucharest, though hasty, was highly effective. The UN successfully apprehended Bucky, the prime suspect in the Vienna massacre, with no serious injuries, only minor bruises. However, during the pursuit, gunshot fire caused some unintended property damage. Since these losses were caused by the capture of Bucky, Lin Feng took the initiative to assume liability for compensation. According to the draft Sokovia Convention, Lin Feng would be personally liable for any property damage caused by the failure of divine protection and would be responsible for full compensation. Even though the Avengers were involved in this incident, he resolutely accepted the compensation. Even without using his divine power, Lin Feng's funds were sufficient to pay the compensation. The patents related to divine research had already brought him a lucrative income. Even without Stark's financial injection, his income was enough to support the daily operations of the Avengers. Lin Feng was still on the phone with the other party. No, sir, there will be no more conflict. Even if the other party provokes me first, I will let Rhodes and Miss Hashimoto exercise restraint and prevent them from conflicting with others. Accountability? Of course there should be accountability, but this is an internal matter of our Avengers, and you don't seem to have the right to interfere. After hanging up the phone, Rogers heard the word accountability and asked in confusion, "Accountability?" Lin Feng sighed and explained, "Before in Vienna, some anti-God people pointed their spearheads at our Avengers, trying to attack Hashimoto, Huanayu and Natasha, and almost caused a violent conflict. In addition, this time you helped Bucky evade police pursuit, which is of a serious nature. The Minister of Martial Arts of the United States wants to sue you. He also wants us, the Avengers, to pay attention to our words and deeds. We are related to the gods, but we are completely different. We should be a tool for maintaining peace, not an institution that conflicts with humans. Rogers sat down and asked, the Minister of Martial Arts of the United States? Could he be? Lin Feng knew what he wanted to say and shook his head. No, Natasha had contact with him, and the detection equipment did not alarm, which means he is not a Kree. We don't know whether he agrees with the US government, but what is certain is that he has not been bewitched and simply wants to hold us accountable. However, he wants to intervene in the accountability within our Avengers, which I cannot agree with. I will not let political elements interfere with the Avengers, and I will not let the Avengers become a political tool. Rogers was relieved and breathed a sigh of relief. Natasha and Sam looked at each other, not knowing what the two were talking about. Bucky was about to be tried, and Rogers and Sam were suspected of being accomplices. Why were these two people not worried at all? As expected, Lin Feng asked Rogers, aren't you worried? Rogers shook his head. It's come to this, worrying is useless. It's already done, regretting or worrying is futile. Instead of worrying here, I should think about how to clear Bucky of suspicion. I just feel a little sorry for Sam for getting him involved. Sam's heart warmed at this, feeling that his efforts were worth it. He didn't feel he had done anything wrong. Lin Feng smiled and patted his shoulder. There will be a chance. But for now, just honestly review Bucky's psychological evaluation and don't make any more trouble. Rogers sat down quietly, and Sam and Natasha also remained silent. The opportunity Lin Feng mentioned meant not only that they could help Rogers clear Bucky of suspicion, but also that they had the opportunity to expose the true murderer. Although he had forgotten who was trying to stir up discord within the Avengers, he clearly remembered that person disguised themselves as a psychiatrist, using the UN's commission to conduct a psychological evaluation on Bucky, hoping to incite new violence. Rogers looked at the three people beside him and asked bluntly, Professor, does Stark know about this? Lin Feng didn't turn, his eyes fixed on the big screen. He already knows. I've already told him. Rogers looked around, but couldn't see Stark. He couldn't help but wonder, then why isn't he here? Lin Feng finally turned around. Rogers, if you were here, how would you explain this to him? Would you tell him that Bucky was just a controlled killing tool? I'm afraid your conscience wouldn't be at peace, and I'm not sure if Bucky could accept it. Stark is depressed right now, and I'm afraid he can't bear this blow. And then, am I just going to watch you guys kill each other? Rogers was speechless. Indeed, he hadn't figured out how to explain it to Stark at the moment. Natasha, standing nearby, caught a key message. Professor, Stark's been depressed lately. What happened? Lin Feng passed the phone to the three of them. Breaking news, Stark Clean Energy in the United States suffered a terrorist attack, and Happy, the head of the security department, was seriously injured and hospitalized. Rogers stared at the screen of his mobile phone with concern. They all knew Happy. He was Stark's good friend and a dedicated security director, but he was seriously injured in the terrorist attack. Stark must be in a terrible mood at the moment. No wonder Professor Lin Feng said he was depressed. Indeed, no matter who it is, they will feel depressed after learning the truth about the death of their parents and the serious injury of their friends. If they see Rogers again at this time, they might just attack him directly in anger. Lin Feng handed a glass of water to the three of them. As far as I know, due to the recent setbacks and the worry about the Kree, Stark has suffered from severe anxiety. Pepper even called the Avengers to complain about Stark's recent work status and mental state. Let's not make things worse for him. Rogers, you are the one who caused this. You should find out the real culprit yourself. Chapter 55 Loki wants to make trouble again. Lin Feng holds a lecture. Chapter 55 Loki is trying to stir up trouble again, and Lin Feng is holding a lecture. 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 55 Loki is trying to stir up trouble again, and Lin Feng is holding a lecture. Upon hearing this, Lin Feng pretended to ponder and said, the next one should be Yang Jian. Yang Jian. Loki thought the name seemed a bit unremarkable. He asked Lin Feng again, is he powerful? Lin Feng shook his head. Not powerful. Loki's heart skipped a beat. No, I haven't started researching him yet. Loki was taken aback. But then Lin Feng added, however, based on my recent research, I found that these ancient figures aren't very powerful when they first awaken. Lin Feng's words weren't fooling Loki. The character he had just assumed only had level 1 access, and could only unleash 10% of their power. Loki was taken aback by this. Immediately, he hurriedly recalled something. This careful recollection actually brought back a key point. That was when he first met Sun Wukong. He felt he was weaker than the second time. The first time, Sun Wukong seemed to only be able to attack with his iron rod. Thinking of this, he gasped, his expression horrified. He had received incredible news. Loki was filled with excitement and said to Lin Feng, "Thank you, Mr. Lin, for sharing this. You're welcome." Seeing Loki's excitement, Lin Feng knew he had been tricked again, and he chuckled to himself. He added, "My research is meant to bring these ancient figures and events to light." Yes, Loki nodded heavily. These words deeply moved him. This was the true nature of a great scholar, selflessly contributing his knowledge. Loki added, "Don't worry, Mr. Lin. I'll have a generous gift for you in a while." "What do you mean?" "Haha, you'll know later." Loki smiled. "I have something else to do, so I'll take my leave now." Loki stood up and hurried away. Lin Feng stared at Loki's back, lost in thought. Loki left the garden. After hearing Lin Feng's words, he once again considered killing Sun Wukong and conquering Earth. The situation was that Tathagata Buda had fallen asleep again, and Sun Wukong wasn't invincible. And with Yang Jian about to awaken, he wouldn't be too strong, so Earth was still attackable. And the generous gift he just offered Lin Feng was a way to repay him by imparting this information. Mr. Lin is truly a great man, Loki exclaimed. He'd been here twice, and both times, he'd generously shared his knowledge with him. Seeing no one was around, Loki took out the Tesseract and left. Asgard's library. Pitch black. Using the Tesseract's power, Loki arrived and groped for books in the darkness. Dwarfs, Knights of Light, Ether Energy, the Doomsday of the Nine Kingdoms. Loki anxiously flipped through the books, eager to find a new supporter. Because, for now, there's only one Sun Wukong on Earth. Even if this Yang Jian awakens, he's still relatively new and not very powerful, making him easy to deal with. Furthermore, there's Thanos, who won't tolerate failure. But not only did he fail, he also sacrificed the notorious Chitauri army, which had conquered the galaxy. He also possesses the Mind Scepter and the Tesseract, so you can imagine how desperately Thanos wants to find him. And if Thanos finds him, how dire will his fate be? Dark Elves. At this moment, Loki's heart trembled. He had discovered a record about the Dark Elves. Loki was different from Thor. Loki loved reading, which was why he had devoted himself to studying witchcraft with his mother. His extensive reading enriched his knowledge. He knew the Dark Elves. They were a powerful race, fearless of life and death. In Asgard's heyday, it took a tremendous effort to defeat the Dark Elves' army. But this defeat was only due to some degree of trickery. When the Nine Kingdoms align, the Dark Elves might awaken. Isn't that the time? Loki was shocked. A 9-planet alignment would occur soon, meaning the Nine Kingdoms would align. But could such a phenomenon actually awaken the Dark Elves? Loki hadn't expected this. But his heart was racing. He wanted to use this race of Dark Elves. However, they were too evil. Would they become uncontrollable? Loki hesitated. But then he thought, the situation was dire, and there was no other way. Thanos was definitely looking for him. If he was found, it would be the end. And back on Earth, Sun Wukong must die, repeatedly undermining his grand plans. This was intolerable. After much hesitation, Loki gritted his teeth, made up his mind, and decided to do it. But I should think about how to make the Dark Elves obey me, Loki pondered. Earth. The heat of the alien attack on Xiangjiang City continued. Meanwhile, Wukong University officials released a Weibo post announcing a new lecture scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Professor Lin Feng would be in attendance, detailing the story of Sun Wukong. This post instantly caused a sensation. Major news platforms rushed to report on the story, and short video platforms also began to post the news. As always, stories about ancient times are incredibly popular these days, drawing significant attention in a matter of minutes. Netizens were abuzz with discussion. Holy crap, is this true or false? Nonsense, it must be true. It's released by Wukong's official website, how could it be false? Awesome. I'm so curious about the details of Sun Wukong, me too. Especially this time, Sun Wukong destroyed the alien army that invaded the Earth, and I'm even more curious about him. We all think the same thing. I'm going to buy a ticket to Beijing right now. I want to listen to it live. I've already bought the ticket. Fuck, there are no more tickets. I heard the news a long time ago, so I came to Beijing 3 days ago. Last time I was stuck in traffic on the highway, this time, I must see the live lecture. 6666. Brother is still so cool. I have to go to work, so I can only watch the live broadcast. Holy crap. Gentlemen, calm down. Beijing is such a small place. It can't handle so many of you coming. That makes sense. Then quickly send Professor Lin to our Zhejiang. Our Zhejiang has convenient transportation in a large area that can accommodate so many people. Zhangxi, oh? Is Zhejiang a big area? Ha 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 ha. I wonder if Professor Lin knows about the Tathagata Buddha. I'm curious about him too. Yeah, I was looking for that comment. I'm curious about him, too. What a shame we can't be there. Guys, if any of you are there, please ask Professor Lin if he can tell us about the Tathagata Buddha. Ha ha ha. Sure, discussions raged. Within a short time, it dominated the trending search charts on all major platforms. Netizens were filled with anticipation and excitement for the lecture. Soon, the second day arrived. The lecture began as scheduled. Chapter 56 Lin Feng's Influence. Chapter 56, Lin Feng's Influence, 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 56, Lin Feng's Influence. Wukong University. Auditorium. It was still half an hour before 10 o'clock, but the audience had already begun to arrive. There were Wukong teachers, professors, and students, as well as members of the public, and even quite a few celebrities, entrepreneurs, and so on. Everyone took their seats, and soon the atmosphere became lively. It's finally starting. Damn. I almost got late. Last time I got stuck on the highway, and this time I got stuck on the North 4th Ring Road. There were so many people. Ha ha ha. Beijing is always jammed with traffic, and now that Professor Lin is giving a lecture, it's even worse. Luckily I had the foresight to come to Wukong University and wait at 2 a.m. Ha ha ha. I didn't see it last time, but this time I can finally see it. I wonder if I can ask Professor Lin for an autograph. Shit. Don't use those fan circle tactics on Professor Lin, okay? That's right. Professor Lin is a scholar, he doesn't do that. I wonder if Professor Lin will talk about the Tathagata Buddha? I don't know. What time is it? What time is it? It's 9:50, and it starts in 10 minutes. Ha ha ha. So exciting. I wonder what Professor Lin will say about Sun Wukong. Yeah. I'm excited too. The discussion continued. Lin Feng's good friend Tang Yiming was also there. His face was filled with excitement, waiting for his friend's lecture to begin. Tang Yiming was stunned for a long time before he came to his senses. He had never imagined that Lin Feng actually had some knowledge of Sun Wukong. He had always thought he was just bragging. Their historical knowledge was almost identical, but Lin Feng's covert research on Sun Wukong had truly astonished and surprised him. Chen Haitian had also arrived, along with Thor and Tony. They certainly wouldn't miss this lecture on Sun Wukong. Soon, 10 o'clock arrived. The livestream equipment was activated at the same moment. In the livestream room, many people were already waiting. The moment the livestream began, netizens erupted in excitement. Here it comes. There's footage. Ha ha ha. It must have been hard to wait. Yeah, where's Professor Lin? Where's Professor Lin? Fuck, I really envy those who are there. Yeah, it's a pity I have to go to work. Otherwise I would have been there too. It's useless. I'm at Wukong University right now, but I can't get in at all. There are too many people. I can only watch the live broadcast outside. Huh? I wonder if the guy who was stuck on the highway managed to get to the scene this time. Ha ha ha. Professor Feng Min walked up to the podium, his face full of excitement and a smile, and said, "Everyone, welcome to the lecture at Wukong University. I am Feng Min, a professor in the history department of Wukong University." Feng Min paused, then smiled and said, "Last time, I told you about the basic situation of Sun Wukong. Everyone should be familiar with Sun Wukong. If it weren't for him in the Xiangjiang city incident, our Earth might have been in the war of invasion by alien civilization. So, I believe that after this incident, everyone must be more curious about Sun Wukong." Feng Min smiled and added, "This time, our newly hired Professor Lin Feng will present the detailed story of Sun Wukong. Let's welcome Professor Lin." Feng Min led the applause. Principal Zhao Songyang and the other veteran professors also enthusiastically applauded. Suddenly, the audience erupted in thunderous applause. Amidst the applause, a young, slender figure walked onto the podium. It was Lin Feng. Everyone was familiar with Lin Feng's appearance, as the video of his speech at Feng Min's last lecture had already gone viral. Those who were following the event had seen the video and knew what he looked like. Furthermore, Most of the audience had been there before. Lin Feng took the podium. Professor Feng Min nodded and smiled, then left. But once the applause died down, many began shouting questions at Lin Feng. This instantly triggered a chain reaction, and the audience erupted in a clamor. In short, the atmosphere was far more enthusiastic than at Feng Min's previous lectures. But the security guards were troubled by the situation. With so much noise, how could it continue? And since it was a live broadcast, if it continued like this, someone might get so excited that they rushed the stage, which would be troublesome. So, the security guards, with megaphones, began to enforce order. Quiet. Everyone, please be quiet. Stop it. Stop it. The lecture needs silence. But no matter what they said, it had no effect. The noise continued. Principals Zhao Songyang and Feng Min were also surprised to see this. They hadn't expected this. This was too much? No, we have to stop it now. We can't let them continue, or the lecture won't go on. But just as they were about to step onto the stage to intervene, Lin Feng reached out and pressed down. Then, the audience instantly fell silent. Zhao Songyang and Feng Min were stunned by this scene. Then, they realized. This was Lin Feng's current influence. I've been teaching all my life, and this is the first time I've seen anything like this, Feng Min exclaimed in amazement. Me too, Zhao Songyang nodded. They could understand the situation. Now everyone wanted to know about Sun Wukong, so naturally the focus was on Lin Feng. If he asked everyone to be quiet, then everyone would naturally quiet down. After the audience quieted down, Lin Feng smiled and said to the microphone, "Everyone, don't get excited. If you have any questions, you can ask them later. You are so noisy that I can't go on." As soon as these words came out, everyone's heart tightened, worried that Professor Lin would stop talking. However, Lin Feng smiled again and said, "So, I hope everyone can keep quiet while I tell you the story of Sun Wukong." "Thank you everyone," Lin Feng finished speaking. The audience was still silent. However, they breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Professor Lin was not angry. "Very good." Seeing this, Lin Feng smiled and nodded, saying, "Then I'll begin. The story will be a bit long, so please listen patiently." Professor Feng mentioned earlier that Sun Wukong was born in Flower Fruit Mountain. The details are that Sun Wukong was conceived from a piece of stone left behind by a powerful woman who refined stones to repair the sky. He embodies the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the essence of the sun and moon. Lin Feng began his story. The audience remained silent, but they were deeply shocked, stunned by Lin Feng's opening story. Holy crap! Repairing the sky? What does that even mean? That sounds amazing. And who is this woman? Everyone was filled with curiosity and astonishment, but they held back, refraining from asking questions for fear of interrupting Professor Lin's explanation. Lin Feng began by describing Sun Wukong's birth and his journey to sea to learn from a master. Under his master's careful guidance, Sun Wukong learned the art of immortality, the 72 transformations, and the somersault cloud. 216. Chapter 215. I was suspicious. Who was it? 216. Chapter 215. Suspicion. Who is it? 2024-11-03. Author. Good Monster. Chapter 215. Suspicion. Who is it? Rogers was cheered up when he heard this. "Professor, do you know who the murderer is?" Lin Feng shook his head. "I don't know yet." Rogers couldn't help but feel a little depressed again. Lin Feng smiled. "We all know that Bucky was in Bucharest at the time and didn't have time to commit the crime, so someone must have impersonated him." Rogers, think about it. Why did he pretend to be Bucky? Rogers pondered for a moment. Because it can attract people's attention. Why attract people's attention? We all know that Bucky chose to live in seclusion. He must have changed his ways, and he also doesn't want to be disturbed. We have all seen the video footage of Thanos' Vanguard invasion. Bucky was the first warrior to rush up to fight, and he did not go to collect the reward afterwards. Not for a fame, not for profit, he just wants to live in seclusion quietly and atone for his sins silently. So why did the murderer want people to notice him? He came for us. Sam on the side was a little unbelievable, and Natasha was also thoughtful. Lin Feng smiled. There may be other possibilities, but this is the most likely. With the recent U.S. aircraft carrier incident and the Loki incident, much of Hydra's information has been made public. Someone interested could decrypt it and understand the relationship between Rogers and Bucky. He wants to find the reclusive Bucky, and the best way is naturally to have 7 billion people around the world search for him. Who could possibly hide under the full force of 7 billion people? Isn't he targeting you just to target you? Rogers was startled, but he had to admit that this was a very reasonable explanation. Stark might seek revenge on Bucky, but he wouldn't resort to such ruthless tactics. He would confront Bucky openly and directly. Natasha interrupted them. Professor, could this be a Kree conspiracy? Lin Feng was stunned. The Avengers were never one-sided. While he didn't know if the mastermind behind this was connected to the Kree, that didn't stop him from accepting Natasha's opinion. Natasha, tell me what you think. I'm the one who's involved, but I'm confused. Rogers and Sam are just too concerned. If anyone can sort out the relationship here, it's probably you, Lin Feng solemnly pleaded with Natasha for advice. Natasha looked at Lin Feng. Professor, I don't know if you've noticed, but since the Avengers were founded, it's always been assumed that there are 3 leaders. You're the founder and everyone's spiritual leader, and that's indisputable. Stark is the biggest behind-the-scenes contributor and supporter, and he's the de facto leader, and that's also unquestionable. Rogers is a role model, and many people unconsciously work harder and pay more attention to their appearance when they see him, and that's even more unquestionable. Now that Thanos' invasion is over, we all know the Kree are eyeing them covetously, but we don't know what their methods are. Lin Feng nodded. Although he had never heard of such a positioning, judging by Sam's expression, it seemed that he agreed with Natasha's opinion. Now, Professor, you're bound by the Covenant. Stark suffers from severe anxiety due to a series of events, and Rogers is in trouble because of Bucky. Is someone secretly directing all of this? Natasha concluded. After all, for the Kree, if they can destroy the 3 Avengers leaders without violence, why not? Everyone was shocked by this. Indeed, after piecing together all the clues, the direction of these events became remarkably clear. As Natasha had said, any blow to the Avengers' 3 leaders, Lin Feng as the spiritual leader, Stark as the pillar of support, and Rogers as the moral role model, would be an immeasurable loss to the Avengers. Due to the enactment of the Sokovia Accords, Lin Feng's personal freedom will be restricted and he will be under the surveillance of a special task force, which greatly limits his opportunities to communicate with the gods. Even communicating with the gods requires the special task force's approval. Stark, under the continuous attacks and intense mental stress, has developed severe anxiety and is on the verge of collapse. Coupled with Happy's unexpected and serious injury, Stark is now on the verge of collapse. Lin Feng felt a surge of guilt as he thought about this. He had originally intended to resolve the misunderstanding and rift between Stark and Rogers as quickly as possible, but he hadn't anticipated it becoming a burden on Stark, nearly the final straw that broke him. However, he had a vague feeling that something was amiss. The Kree couldn't possibly have calculated so precisely how he would comfort Stark. That's right, calculations. Hydra's Zola algorithm. No wonder he'd always felt like something was missing. He only remembered that someone was trying to sow discord between Rogers and Stark, but he'd forgotten that Zola's algorithm could predict the future. The two weren't originally connected, but with the Kree's ingenuity and tactics, they could easily exploit Zola's algorithm to accelerate this process, catalyzing their invasion of Earth. Natasha continued, Professor, God will not interfere in human affairs. There is too much room for maneuver here. As long as we hold you back, God will not show up easily. If God does not show up, the first line of defense on Blue Planet will be our Avengers. The Kree target you, on the one hand, because you are the leader of the Avengers, and on the other hand, because you are the spokesperson for God. If Rogers is wanted by various governments and Stark is defeated by anxiety, then our Avengers will actually be dead in name only. Am I right? Lin Feng nodded, absolutely right, so we must counter each move and not let the Kree's conspiracy succeed. Sam and Rogers looked at each other, and they also realized the seriousness of the situation. Sam asked, Professor, how should we counter this? Lin Feng pondered for a moment. Right now, the Kree are employing a divide and conquer strategy against us, dealing with me, Rogers, and Stark separately. My situation isn't urgent yet, the agreement hasn't been implemented yet, and my freedom hasn't been restricted. As for Rogers, they want to hold him captive, so we must catch the real culprit and expose their conspiracy. As for Stark, his anxiety is a psychological issue. He needs company and relaxation, and he also needs to find Happy's killer. Natasha, go help him find some leads. I'll arrange for some psychiatrists to come. After Natasha left, Lin Feng turned to Rogers. Rogers, do you remember Zola? The Hydra scientist? Remember? His algorithm caused the aircraft carrier crisis. His algorithm can predict the future, Rogers replied. Lin Feng couldn't help but sigh in emotion when he saw that Rogers still remembered Zola, but clearly hadn't considered that the Kree might have used Hydra's publicly available information to find this algorithm. Rogers was too upright to have considered the depth of conspiracy. He had no choice but to remind him, Rogers, we all know this algorithm can predict the future. So, could the Kree use it to steer certain future developments in their favor? Rogers suddenly understood. Professor, you're saying these things were going to happen anyway, but knowing the future trajectory, the Kree are either advancing or delaying them, aligning them to ultimately create a favorable outcome for them, Lin Feng agreed. In his memory, Stark's anxiety attack and the execution of the Mandarin who announced the massacre were supposed to have happened 5 years ago. Sam couldn't help but gasp when he heard this. If that's true, these Kree people are too scheming. They are so calculating, Rogers sighed. Professor, I'm sorry, it's all my fault that you've fallen into this situation. Lin Feng patted him on the shoulder and comforted him. Don't think like that, it's not your fault. It was destined that you saved Bucky, and it was also destined that I was bound by the draft convention. There is no causal relationship between the two things. Instead of apologizing to me now, you might as well think about how to catch the real culprit and how to smash the Kree's conspiracy. That's the right way. Rogers began to cheer up when he heard this. Professor, if the real culprit behind the scenes did so much just to lure out Bucky, then is it possible that he could have disguised himself as a staff member to sneak in for this psychological evaluation? Sam immediately suggested, should we go and notify Vice Captain Ross now and ask him to check the personnel quickly? Lin Feng shook his head. No need, I'm afraid he has already sneaked in. Excuse me, the psychological evaluation is about to begin. Vice Captain Ross asked me to watch you. Please don't run around. Sharon Carter walked in. The person who conducted Bucky's psychological evaluation is Hufus Lika from Germany, a professional psychologist who's said to be left-handed. Sharon, intentionally or unintentionally, revealed the information Rogers was concerned about. Everyone bowed their heads in silence upon seeing Sharon. The Avengers' internal affairs shouldn't be divulged to outsiders. Lin Feng was pondering a response. Clearly, the Kree's promotion of the Huaxia cult and its anti-God movement had caused him considerable trouble. The introduction of the Sokovia Accords undoubtedly restricted him. While he possessed divine power and could circumvent such restrictions, would the Kree discover his true identity? The Kree's technological capabilities were still unclear, and Lin Feng had no idea of the extent of their supreme intelligence. Furthermore, Hashimoto Kanzuki's intelligence hadn't been updated, and a crucial breakthrough was currently lacking. The enemy was in the dark, while we were in the light. The situation was unfavorable for the Avengers. Under these circumstances, a change of strategy was necessary. Outwardly, Lin Feng would continue to act as God's spokesperson, but secretly, he would conduct his investigation under a different identity. Meanwhile, it was time to find a new God spokesperson. Sharon glanced around, confirming that only a few Avengers members were in the room, and breathed a sigh of relief. She spotted a button and pressed it. The television screen, originally broadcasting the news, suddenly switched to a scene from an interrogation room. Inside, Bucky sat expressionless in his prison van, looking dejected and languid, devoid of energy. Rogers felt a pang of pain at the sight. The high-spirited Brooklyn teenager he remembered was now unshaven, resembling a middle-aged alcoholic, and frustrated. The contrast made it difficult for him to imagine the torture Bucky had endured at the hands of Hydra, and the regret he felt for his actions. But he hadn't forgotten that it was Sharon who had allowed him to see his comrades. Tears welled in his eyes as he said gratefully, "Thank you, Sharon, you're welcome." Sharon smiled, handing them the receipt. Rogers glanced at it briefly before handing it to Sam. Sam saw it and grumbled, "Bird prop? What a ridiculous name." Sharon shrugged. "I didn't register it." On the TV screen, a psychiatrist, with his back to the camera, began his assessment. "Hello, sir. I'm sent by the United Nations to assess you. My name is Hufus Lika. Please don't be hostile. I'm not here to accuse you. I'm just conducting a psychological assessment. Do you know where you are, Mr. James?" Bucky remained silent, seemingly unwilling to acknowledge this stranger. The psychiatrist seemed somewhat resigned. "Mr. James, it's difficult for me to help you if you don't speak." Mr. James, hearing this name finally gave Bucky some reaction. He remembered someone who had once told him not to hide from the past but to own up to his mistakes. Therefore, when Thanos' vanguard appeared, he stood up and fought fiercely, seeking only to atone for his sins. If the bombing of Vienna was confirmed, his psychological evaluation would inevitably result in the death penalty. Since he was about to die, why bother worrying so much? Before he died, why not enjoy himself? He replied coldly, "My name is Bucky." Rogers looked up suddenly at this. Dr. Lika continued, "Well, Barnes, do you know where you are now?" Meanwhile, the postman drove up and rang the bell. "Hello, is anyone there?" He saw someone open the door, so he walked to the back of the car, opened it, and unloaded a large box. "I have something big for you." The man who opened the door was dressed in war clothes and looked like a maintenance worker. He looked at the box the postman handed over. "Did someone send me something?" The postman wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Yes, this thing is quite heavy. Here, please sign for it." After signing, the maintenance worker eagerly opened the box. Seeing the dense coils of wire inside, he asked in confusion, "What is this? Is this a prank someone sent me?" The postman was speechless. Sharon handed Rogers a photo. "Rogers, this photo helped us locate Bucky." Rogers glanced at Sam, then at Lin Feng, then replied, "Sharon, have you ever considered that the person who provided this photo doesn't actually want to find Bucky, but simply wants you to find him?" Sharon frowned. "Is there a mole within the UN?" Rogers stopped there, not delving into the details. But Lin Feng spoke up, "Whoever provided this photo, after helping us find Bucky, would definitely try to get close to him. So, who's the closest person to Bucky right now?" Everyone looked at the psychiatrist on the screen. Chapter 58 Audience Questions, Who is Tathagata Buddha? Chapter 58, Audience Questions, Who is Tathagata Buddha? 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 58, Audience Questions, Who is Tathagata Buddha? Immediately, everyone reacted, unable to sit still, shouting excitedly. "Professor Lin, is that all? Tell me more." "Yes. Tell me more. You've definitely figured out more than this, right? There must be more, even if it's unorganized. Tell me about it, Professor Lin. I can't get enough. I really want to know what happened to Sun Wukong." "That's right. Tell me more, Professor Lin. Professor Lin." The audience was agitated, shouting for Lin Feng to explain more, and finally, they all chanted Lin Feng's name in unison, their voices resounding and unanimous. Principals Zhao Songyang and Fang Min saw this, their faces changed again. They were really worried that the audience would lose control of their emotions and run to the podium. Just then, Lin Feng reached out and held his hand down. The noise from the audience faded again, until it finally reached complete silence. Zhao Songyang and Fang Min took another breath, a bit surprised. But they were also relieved. Thankfully, Professor Lin was still able to control the situation. Seeing the audience's curiosity amplified, Lin Feng smiled. This was exactly what he wanted. He said, "I'm sorry, everyone. I'm still researching the subsequent situation regarding Sun Wukong. I'll announce it once I've compiled it." Lin Feng smiled and quickly ended the topic, saying, "If you have any questions about Sun Wukong, please feel free to ask. I'll share what I know." As soon as these words were spoken, the audience began to whisper among themselves. But with so many people in the audience, even whispers were loud. "Oh, what a shame. I didn't get enough yet. I really want to know what happened to Sun Wukong. Did he get killed?" Speechless. "Do you want to think about what you're saying?" "That's right. If Sun Wukong was killed, who took out the alien army in Xiangjiang City? You? Ha ha ha, don't you have a brain?" A cacophony of voices. Lin Feng's good friend Tang Yiming sat in the audience, excited and looking at Lin Feng with a touch of envy. The excitement was that learning so much about Sun Wukong was a thrill for him. As for envy, last time, everyone had sat together and watched, but this time, Lin Feng stood on the stage, explaining Sun Wukong's story, the center of attention. As a friend, it was impossible not to be envious. Chen Haitian looked surprised. After listening to Lin Feng's story, he finally understood why Sun Wukong resisted serving in an official position. "So that's how it is," Chen Haitian muttered. Tony and Thor, on the other hand, looked shocked. Their focus was on Sun Wukong's cultivation skills and Lin Feng's account of his experiences. The East China Sea Dragon Palace, the soul-binding palace in the underworld, and the Heavenly Palace all filled them with immense curiosity and astonishment. That was truly a magical era, they both thought simultaneously. Tony, in particular, was still an Earthling. But, on Earth today, none of these places existed. Where had they gone? Tony frowned, puzzled. Inside the live stream, the audience also responded with comments. Fuck, it's already finished. I haven't even had enough. Who said it wasn't? I'm so curious about what happened to Sun Wukong later. Come on, don't be ungrateful. These stories we're hearing are the product of Professor Lin's painstaking research. Yes, it must be very difficult for Professor Lin to come up with so many things. Damn. Didn't Professor Lin say to ask questions? Why isn't anyone asking, who's here? Ask me why the Tathagata Buddha called Sun Wukong the fighting Buddha. I'm curious, the comments continued. After some low whispers from the audience, someone finally stood up. Everyone was stunned when they saw this person. Damn, why is it him again? Is this grandson so fond of showing off? This person was none other than the students who stood up and asked questions at Professor Feng's lecture before, Suzhou. Suzhou looked at Lin Feng and said with a smile, Professor Lin, I wonder if you still remember me. I remember, Lin Feng said. You are the student who asked Professor Feng questions at the lecture held by Professor Feng before. Yes, then what questions do you have for me now? I want to ask, you said that the golden cudgel can grow bigger and smaller, right? But I have seen the video. That iron rod doesn't look like it can grow bigger or smaller, right? As soon as this was said, some people also realized the problem. Lin Feng smiled and explained, you're looking at things from that era through the eyes of modern people. Common sense doesn't apply to that era. Let me give you a simple example. A person couldn't possibly transform into a streak of light, right? But figures from that era could. Take, for example, the familiar Sun Wukong. So, from this perspective, his golden cudgel can grow and shrink. What's so strange about it? Suzhou took a breath. Lin Feng's analogy with people made him feel suddenly enlightened. He understood. So that's how it is. He sat down. Everyone else agreed. Hearing this, felt it made sense. That era was inherently magical. A rod possessing the ability to grow and shrink wasn't surprising. Thor, however, was most deeply moved by this. His hammer was truly magical. Not only could it summon lightning, but it would come to him whenever he thought of it. But suddenly, Thor realized something and quickly stopped thinking about it. If he intended the hammer to come, and it flew over, it would undoubtedly damage the surrounding buildings and disrupt a lecture. At this moment, another person stood up. And he was a monk. He said, Professor Lin, I am the abbot of Jingguang Temple, my Dharma name is Huzi. I would like to ask you, who is the Tathagata Buddha who appeared in Xiangjiang City? Huzi looked puzzled and bewildered. Everyone was stunned to see the monk. They had the impression that these people seemed pure and unconcerned, not interested in joining in the fun. Why were they attending a lecture now? As mentioned before, although myths and legends have disappeared from this world, religions like Taoism and Buddhism still exist. It's just that they don't know which figure to worship. When Lin Feng first appeared as the Tathagata Buddha, the unknown statue enshrined in their temple shattered. This startled them, and they also had a premonition. Later, when they saw the video of the Tathagata Buddha from Xiangjiang City, they were completely shocked. They felt as if they had some connection to the Tathagata Buddha, but they couldn't put their finger on it. This made them desperate to find out who the Tathagata Buddha was. Hearing this, Lin Feng looked at Huzi. He had anticipated this situation. The appearance of the Tathagata Buddha inevitably piqued the curiosity of Buddhist monks, who would want to know who he was. I'm not sure why Taoism and Buddhism still exist in a world without myths and legends, but that's unimportant. Since they don't know who they should worship, I'll tell them who they should worship and restore true Taoism and Buddhism. Lin Feng smiled inwardly. He said, I haven't researched the specifics of the Tathagata Buddha. However, I am certain of one thing, he is the Buddha, and that is what you monks believe in. You Buddhists should create a golden statue of him and worship him, rather than worshipping unknown objects. 217. Chapter 216 Chaotic Scene. 217. Chapter 216, Chaotic Scene 2024-11-03 Author, Good Monster Chapter 216, Chaotic Scene Bucky remained silent. Leica spread her hands. Mr. Barnes, since you're unwilling to answer, let me ask you another question. Have you experienced many things? Many things that others haven't witnessed. Bucky's mind flashed to the faces of those he had killed. A trace of fear, struggle, and pain crossed his features. He replied in a low, angry voice, "I don't want to talk about it." "Oh, then we don't need to talk too much? Just one thing." Leica checked the time, fiddling with a pen in her right hand. Lin Feng noticed something was wrong. He's right-handed. Dr. Leica is left-handed. This is a fake. Several people stared at Leica's right hand. Meanwhile, the maintenance worker was about to move the box of items to the trash can. Suddenly, a wave hit and blew him away. It turned out to be a bomb. The maintenance worker lived near the power station. The bomb's power was neither too strong nor too weak, but it was enough to destroy most of the structure. Inside the UN office building, the power suddenly went out. The instant the power went out, darkness enveloped everything. Ra stared at the pitch-black screen. He tried to connect the radio, but found it still functioning. He quickly called the security forces via pager. "All departments, attention. Power system failure. Keep an eye on Bucky. Security personnel, reinforce the interrogation department. All other personnel, evacuate in an orderly manner. The armory must be sealed. Security forces, remember. If you find a Winter Soldier, if he resists, kill him immediately." The sudden darkness threw everyone in the office for a moment, but Lin Feng quickly adjusted, realizing it was the M-bomb that was causing the trouble. As expected, Sharon, upon seeing the power outage, knew something was wrong and immediately declared, "Hurry to the East Basement Level 5, Rogers," barely able to thank him, hurried off, and Sam followed without hesitation. Seeing Rogers and Sam's actions, T'Challa knew they were going to find Bucky, and he became eager to make his own move. Sharon turned to Lin Feng, "Professor Lin, I'm about to get to work. Please take care and evacuate as soon as possible." She drew her pistol, ready for action. The power outage at the UN headquarters indicated a serious security vulnerability, allowing the enemy to compromise the system at any moment. Lin Feng didn't rush out, he was sorting through recent information. Natasha searched for the former Soviet officer, but only found his body and a ransacked home, proving the killer was always one step ahead. The Mandarin incident took 5 years to unfold, and while he had no connection to the Avengers, he was bound by the treaty. The Kree's mastery of time was astonishing. The Vienna killer targeted Rogers, who was bound by the treaty. Stark was in a state of mental decline, and the Kree's plan was precise and ingenious. These events had been exploited, intentionally or unintentionally, but the Kree's objectives had not yet been fully achieved. Therefore, they might continue to exploit these events and the individuals involved. In the basement, Bucky, seeing the sudden darkness, felt a sense of foreboding. He knew he was being held captive by the UN, and the power outage was no accident, it must have been caused by someone. He stared outside. "What's going on?" Dr. Leica removed his glasses. "You're afraid of speaking and falling into endless terror, so you remain silent. But if you're truly asked to reveal something, would you tell it? Let's talk about your homeland. Not Romania, not Brooklyn, but your true home." He pulled out a notebook he'd snatched from a former Soviet officer. Bucky stared at the notebook with a 5-pointed red star, his eyes widening. He'd fought so hard to escape Hydra's control, thinking everything was at peace, only to have Dr. Leica deal him another crushing blow. The notebook contained the code that would allow him to regain his weapon of death. Dr. Leica removed his glasses, using a small flashlight to illuminate the words in the dim light. He read in Russian, "Desire." Bucky's head began to ache. He fought against the erosion of his will, growling angrily, "Stop!" Leica ignored him and continued, reading, "Rust." Bucky's cries of resistance continued, his head tilted back in agony. He wished he could kill the maniac who had once again opened the gates of hell. Leica continued, 17. Bucky clenched his fists, the demonic program in his mind sapping his will. "Stop!" Leica looked at Bucky with amusement, her eyes a challenge of disdain. He stared at his own face and fiercely pronounced the key word, "Dawn." Bucky lost control, his senses eroded by the program. He roared in anger, using his robotic arms to easily unlock his handcuffs. He stared at the barrier before him, roaring like a beast, and struck with all his might, venting his anger. Only one voice remained in his mind, "Destroy everything, let everyone die." Leica's voice seemed to echo in his ears, yet seemed to be far away, constantly flooding into his mind. Furnace. 9. Kindness. Homecoming. 1. Train car. With a final note, Bucky punched through the barrier of his cell. Leica stared in astonishment at the shattered barrier. Although he knew Bucky was a super soldier, It still amazed him that one man could blast open the door with brute force alone. Without time for surprise, he approached Bucky, who stood erect, and tentatively asked in Russian, "Soldier." Bucky, expressionless, replied in Russian, "At your service, Dr. Lika." Ecstatic, commanded in an unquestionable voice, "I want you to report back on the mission for December 21st, 1991. At the same time, he vowed to himself, Helmut Lika, will take revenge. Reaching the 5th basement level, Roger saw a field of fallen guards. The ground was clean and bloodless. He checked their breath, confirming they were still breathing, and felt a sense of relief. Help! A faint cry for help came from a distance. Rogers rushed over, only to find Helmut awake. "Who are you? What are you trying to do?" Rogers demanded, pulling Helmut to his feet, demanding angrily. Seeing Rogers knew his identity, Helmut sneered, "I just want to see how people's faith crumbles." Rogers stared at the stern-faced Helmut before him, bewildered by his madness. Sam checked and found the fallen guard was only unconscious, then rushed to Rogers. However, a sudden mechanical fist swept down, and Sam miraculously dodged the fatal blow, but Bucky then grabbed his neck and threw him, knocking him unconscious. Rogers saw Bucky lose control again, realizing he was being controlled by Hydra's program again. He ignored Helmut and rushed forward to try to subdue Bucky and prevent the situation from escalating. However, he hesitated, holding back. Bucky, due to the activation of the Hydra program, had lost his self-awareness and only obeyed orders, striking with deadly force and without mercy. Rogers was beaten back and kicked into the elevator. Bucky left the interrogation room without a glance back. Sam wasn't unconscious for long. He faintly smelled the scent of ether and opened his eyes, catching a glimpse of Helmut preparing to leave. Sam struggled to his feet, yelling, "Hey, Helmut!" Startled awake, turned around and saw Sam awake. Though Sam was a little dazed, he was still an Avenger, far more powerful than he was. With this in mind, Helmut fled. He didn't want to fight Sam, and reinforcements could arrive at any moment. If the UN personnel saw a psychiatrist fighting Avengers fighters, his identity would likely be exposed. Sam pursued him relentlessly. Bucky, relying on his formidable individual combat skills, launched a frontal attack. Given the large number of personnel evacuating nearby, the security guards opted to use batons rather than guns to subdue Bucky. However, their fighting skills and reflexes proved useless to Bucky, and he easily knocked them to the ground. Sharon arrived and immediately rushed forward. She held out for a few more blows, but was ultimately knocked to the ground by Bucky. Bucky was about to finish off Sharon when a sudden, powerful kick sent him flying several meters. He turned to face the unexpected visitor. T'Challa looked at Bucky. His eyes, filled with panic when they first met, were now emotionless, filled only with murderous intent. How could the same person's personality change so drastically in just a short time after the power outage? Without a second thought, T'Challa charged forward. Though unarmored, his physical prowess gave him the confidence to kill his father's murderer right then and there. Bucky had no desire to engage in a fight. The command to retreat resonated in his mind. He knocked T'Challa back with a punch, then, taking advantage of the moment T'Challa fell to the ground, quickly fled. Rising, T'Challa gazed in surprise at the crowd that surrounded him. Bucky had already slipped into the crowd and fled. In the elevator, Rogers, having been knocked down, awoke. His first thought was that Bucky was fleeing. He tossed off his coat and struggled upward. His years of military experience had given him an intuitive sense of the rooftop's design, resembling a helipad. If Bucky got into trouble, the quickest escape route would be the rooftop helipad, especially if there were helicopters. Rogers summoned his strength and rushed to the rooftop. Sam chased the man impersonating Dr. Lika, but ultimately lost him. This struck him as unsettling. After all, he was a Special Forces soldier from the Airborne Rescue Unit, yet he had been outmatched by someone, not a super soldier like Rogers, but just an ordinary person. Meanwhile, Lin Feng followed Ross to the 5th basement level. Seeing the mess on the ground, Ross angrily cursed, "Damn it! That executioner got away," Lin Feng whispered in his ear, and Ross was overjoyed. "Really?" Lin Feng nodded. Ross breathed a sigh of relief and ordered, "Medical personnel, get to basement level 5 immediately. We need help." Then he looked at Lin Feng and said, "Professor Lin, if you put it that way, it seems Blue Planet is facing a new crisis, isn't it?" Lin Feng remained silent and simply nodded. Ross thought for a moment. No time to lose, please. On the rooftop, Bucky had found the helicopter and was about to fly it away. However, Rogers suddenly appeared and forcibly pulled the helicopter away, preventing it from taking off. Bucky saw this and grabbed Rogers by the neck, causing him to suffocate as the helicopter plummeted uncontrollably toward the building below. Below lay a vast lake. Returning to his office, Ross quickly dismissed the others and pressed a button. He stared at Lin Feng. "Professor Lin, there's no one else here, and the room is completely soundproofed. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Lin Feng revealed that the guards in the basement were safe and sound thanks to divine intervention. Considering that the gods typically intervene only when Blue Star faces a major crisis, Ross immediately realized the severity of the situation and invited Lin Feng to his office. Lin Feng took out a document and a small pill from the file bag he carried with him, and said as he took them out, "The gods once warned me that I should not let my guard down even after the crisis of Thanos' invasion of the Earth is resolved, because there are still enemies lurking on the blue planet. In view of the recent vague attitude of people around the world towards the gods, and the enemies are always lurking in the dark, there is no conclusive evidence, so I did not make this news public." Ross took the file bag, saw the file name Cree Information File, listened to Lin Feng's explanation, and understood Lin Feng's intention. "Professor Lin, are you saying that the enemy is lurking in the shadows, and people may not believe the warnings of the gods, and may even side with the enemy? That's why you didn't disclose any information about the enemy?" Lin Feng nodded in confirmation. "The document in your hand is the result of the research of Dr. Stark and Dr. Senna from our Avengers. It contains information and data about the Kree. There's also a USB flash drive in the file bag with the corresponding data. You can save it to your computer when you have the chance. However, it's better not to disclose it." Ross was stunned and asked, "Why?" Then he seemed to think of something and asked in surprise, "Is there a traitor within the United Nations?" Lin Feng stood up. "This is also one of the reasons why I don't want to disclose it. Public opinion is not in my favor, and people's hearts are not in my favor. What effect will my disclosure have? Therefore, the Avengers decided to wait and see while fighting in secret. We will eradicate the Kree in secret, and at the same time, decide whether to disclose information based on the public opinion." Ross pondered for a moment and asked, "Professor, aren't you afraid that the people of Blue Star have been infiltrated?" Lin Feng smiled. "Our genes are not much different from the Kree's. They don't have the technology for assimilation, nor the need for it, so I'm not worried about that. Their numbers shouldn't be large, otherwise they would have launched a large-scale attack on Blue Star long ago. My only concern now is if the upper echelons of various countries are infiltrated by the Kree." Hearing this, Ross couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Lin Feng's concerns were not unfounded. Relations between nations are based on interests, and thus wars and negotiations often flare up. Although the current international situation has eased relations, local wars and terrorist incidents continue to occur. The Kree could very well exploit this fact. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 59 The Abbot is grateful to Lin Feng, you have a connection with Buda. Chapter 59 The Abbot is grateful to Lin Feng, you have a connection with Buda. 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 59 The Abbot is grateful to Lin Feng, you have a connection with Buda. When these words came out, everyone in the room was shocked. Tathagata Buddha is actually a Buddhist belief? This is too sudden, right? However, if you think about it carefully, he does seem to have a connection with Buddhism. First of all, he is a bald head. Secondly, there is Buddha in his name. And there is also a word ancestor. This word is not ordinary. Not everyone can be called ancestor. He trembled all over, and his confused eyes gradually brightened, as if he understood something. Finally, his expression was slightly excited, and he put his hands together, and couldn't help but say, Amitabha. These 4 words were recited when the shadow of Tathagata Buddha appeared, and before that, this sentence did not exist in this world. He said gratefully, "Thank you, Benefactor Lin, for showing me the way forward in Buddhism. It turns out that for thousands of years, Buddhism has been on the wrong track. I'm so ashamed. If it weren't for Benefactor Lin, I don't know how long Buddhism would have strayed." He felt ashamed. Then, he added, Benefactor Lin, I have a connection with Buddhism. Please visit me again someday. Amitabha. With that, Huzi hurriedly left his seat and walked away, his pace rather briskly, without looking back. He wanted to quickly inform all Buddhist temples of this situation, rectify the situation, and put an end to centuries of wrongdoing. But Lin Feng, hearing this, wondered, what does this monk mean? Is he trying to convert me to Buddhism? Any monk who says you have a connection with Buddhism is likely to do so. Everyone was stunned, wondering, we'd finally made it to this lecture, and now we're so anxious to leave before it's over? Would that be a loss? What if there were more secrets to come? But then, on second thought, they understood Huzi's feelings. Buddhism had been wrong for thousands of years. Now, thanks to Professor Lin's enlightenment, people have realized that the Tathagata Buddha is the true Buddhist faith. Wouldn't they be thrilled to tell all Buddhist temples in the world about this? Anyone would be just as excited. As the lecture was in full swing, no one realized that a once-in-a-millennium wonder was slowly taking shape. When this wonder occurred, the universe's spacetime would gradually overlap, potentially opening a spacetime corridor between the 9 kingdoms. This corridor would be the gateway to the dark matter realm. No one on Earth realized this, but Loki was well aware of the reality. He harnessed the power of the Tesseract to reach Vat-Alheim, the former home of the Dark Elves. However, the area was now completely desolate, with dust drifting like a yellow mist in all directions, devoid of any sign of greenery or life. Loki said solemnly, although the records show the Dark Elves were annihilated, the body of their leader, Malekith, was never found. I suspect he fled, but I can't be sure. If I can find him, then the rest will be easier. Loki, clutching the cosmic cube, attempted to track Malekith's whereabouts by searching for traces left by the wormhole's creation. This was his 15th time standing on the surface of Vat-Alheim, searching for any trace of Malekith at the side of the battle. How could I not find him? Was Malekith truly defeated? Leaving no trace, Loki frowned, reluctantly pacing forward. He walked for an unknown amount of time. Suddenly, he stopped and looked ahead. From the void ahead, a faint aura of darkness emanated. Loki's lips curled up, and he exclaimed, "Found it! Earth, prepare for my counterattack." After Huzi left, the lecture resumed. Several more people stood up to ask questions, and Lin Feng answered them one by one. Then, another person stood up and asked, "Professor Lin, I have a question. Excuse me, you said Sun Wukong's title is the Great Sage equaling Heaven, so why does Tathagata Buddha also call him Fighting and Victory Buddha?" This question piqued the curiosity of many. But none of them said anything, quietly awaiting Professor Lin's answer. In the livestream, many netizens excitedly responded with comments. "Wow, someone finally asked this question, yeah, ha ha ha. I've always been curious about this." Lin Feng smiled and said, "I don't know the answer yet. However, I think Sun Wukong must have done something later to earn him this title." Everyone was disappointed after hearing the first part. But then they heard the second part. Thinking about it carefully, it was possible. But what did Sun Wukong do? Everyone's curiosity was piqued again. The student pondered for a moment and agreed that it made sense. Then, he looked at Lin Feng and asked, "Then Sun Wukong will be called Fighting and Victory Buddha. Does this mean he will become a Buddhist in the future?" This student had just realized that Tathagata Buddha's name contained the character Buddha, and now, Sun Wukong's title also contained the character Buddha. Upon hearing this, everyone realized this and looked at Lin Feng curiously. Lin Feng nodded and said, "Yes, judging by this title, Sun Wukong will indeed eventually become a Buddhist." Everyone gasped. This was a bit surprising. How did he suddenly become a Buddhist? What exactly did he do later? Everyone became more curious and wanted to know more. Lin Feng smiled and added, "However, for now, there is another question. According to the information I've researched, Sun Wukong is usually called Great Sage or Sun Dashan, not by his name." At this remark, everyone was stunned. They hadn't thought it was a big deal before. But now, after Lin Feng's words, they began to feel that calling him by his name did seem disrespectful to Sun Wukong. He has saved mankind twice in a row. Damn. Now that you put it that way, it does feel a bit disrespectful to Sun Wukong. Yeah, I didn't feel that way before. In fact, I felt it a long time ago, but I didn't know what to call him. I thought about calling him Ancestor. After all, he was a person from ancient times, but it feels so awkward and weird. But now Professor Lin said to call him the Great Sage. I inexplicably feel that it seems very appropriate. Fuck, I have the same feeling. I feel that Sun Wukong should be called the Great Sage. Yes, yes, yes. I have the same feeling. The live broadcast room was filled with barrages, and they were all barrages with such content. Lin Feng saw the reaction of the audience below and a smile appeared on his face. He had discovered this situation before and thought about explaining this matter in the lecture so that everyone would know how to call Sun Wukong. Next, some people asked questions, but Lin Feng answered them one by one. Finally, no one stood up to ask questions. Lin Feng glanced around and said, "Doesn't everyone have any questions?" Seeing this, everyone thought that Professor Lin would announce that this lecture was over and see you next time. However, who would have thought that Professor Lin would say, "If no one has any more questions, then I will tell you about a secret I discovered during my research during this period." As soon as these words came out, the whole room was shocked and curious, and there was an uproar. Chapter 60. The lecture ended and everyone was shocked. Chapter 60. The lecture ended, and everyone was shocked. 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 60. The lecture ended, and everyone was shocked. Everyone was extremely curious and excited. Oh my god, there's a secret. Ha. I was saying Professor Lin might have figured out something else. Stop bragging, you hindsight. How could I be bragging? Look, Professor Lin studied Sun Wukong, so it's only natural that he would figure out something else based on his research, right? It's like spider silk, it always involves other things. Yeah, you have a point. But didn't Professor Lin say that Sun Wukong should be called the Great Sage? Why are you still calling him Sun Wukong? You're so disrespectful. Ha. What secret is Professor Lin? Yeah, tell me. There was an uproar. Some people whispered to each other, expressing their opinions. Some fanatical and bold people loudly asked Lin Feng what the secret was. The netizens in the live broadcast room also became curious and excited. Even Principal Zhao Songyang and the others were piqued with curiosity and surprise. They hadn't heard of this before. What secret had Professor Lin uncovered? Wasn't he keeping it a secret? Only now revealing it? Lin Feng smiled at the audience's reaction. This was exactly the effect he'd been aiming for. When the system issued a random task to unearth Yang Jian from the moon, he'd conceived an idea. Now, he was ready to put it into action. Lin Feng reached down, signaling for everyone to be quiet and calm. Once the audience quieted down, Lin Feng said, "This situation is likely to shock everyone, so please be prepared." Everyone thought he was exaggerating. What could be so unacceptable in this situation? Lin Feng waited a few seconds before smiling. Based on my recent research, I've discovered that Sun Wukong, also known as the Great Sage, lived in an ancient era known as the Primordial Era. Primordial Era? Everyone was startled at the word. An inexplicable feeling settled within them. Lin Feng continued, "So, the Earth at that time was not called the Earth, but the Honghuang continent. The area of the Honghuang continent can be said to be boundless. Why do I say that? You can see it from the situation of the Great Sage. First of all, the Great Sage has the magical power of the somersault cloud, right? One somersault is 108,000 miles. What is the concept of 108,000 miles? For example, one circle of the Earth is 40,076 kilometers, so 108,000 miles is 54,000 kilometers. The Great Sage went around the Earth once with one somersault, and there was an extra 14,000 kilometers, which is obviously not right. Besides, the Great Sage fought against 100,000 heavenly soldiers and generals. It is impossible that they were circling the Earth while fighting, right? This is too funny, hiss. Everyone took a collective breath and fell into shock when they heard this. Lin Feng added, "The second point is also the most intuitive. In that era, there were countless powerful individuals, including figures like the Great Sage and Tathagata Buda. If the environment at that time was only as big as the Earth, how could it possibly accommodate them? It's like taking a bucket and putting a few fry in it, it's fine. But if you put a few large fish weighing 4 or 5 pounds in it, it definitely won't fit." Everyone was shocked when these words came out. The example just given had made everyone somewhat believe it. Now, this more intuitive statement made everyone believe it completely. Suddenly, everyone couldn't control their excitement and burst into an uproar. Fuck, that makes sense. Yeah, if the Earth was this size during the prehistoric era, then there's no way it could have accommodated Sun, the Great Sage and the others. That's right. The Great Sage could have circled the Earth with a single somersault. Shocking. This is truly shocking. Professor Lin is incredible. He actually discovered this. Incredible. Today's lecture reveals the secrets of Earth's ancient past. It will absolutely shock the world and spark research into the Earth in countries around the world. That's right. This kind of thing will absolutely rock the world. Incredible. Professor Lin is truly incredible. Fuck. It suddenly occurred to me that Professor Lin's appearance was meant to bring about these events for us, right? What are you thinking? Do you think Professor Lin is also someone from the prehistoric era who has awakened? How is that possible? The audience erupted in uproar. Chen Haitian and the others were also shocked. They hadn't expected such a situation to occur. Lin Feng once again signaled for silence. After the crowd quieted down, he smiled again. Based on these circumstances, I propose a bold hypothesis. The transformation of the Great Desolate Continent into the present-day Earth is most likely the result of a devastating war. The Great Desolate Continent was shattered, resulting in Earth's appearance. Then, some of the fragments dissipated, while others drifted across the universe. For example, the Moon, which is close to Earth, is very likely a fragment of the Great Desolate Continent. Everyone was collectively shocked and surprised. Seeing the stunned expressions on the audience's faces, Lin Feng knew his goal had been achieved. Next, he would reveal information about the Moon to spark their curiosity and exploration. Lin Feng smiled. Of course, these are just my hypotheses, and they can't be verified. If we go to the Moon and search, and find traces of the ancient war, then my hypothesis is correct. If not, then it means my hypothesis is wrong, and the Great Desolate Continent transformed into the present-day Earth for another reason. Everyone nodded silently, understanding the meaning. But their curiosity was already piqued, and they wanted to know if there were any traces of the ancient war on the Moon. After all, if there were, it would prove that Professor Lin was right. But everyone knew that with China's current technology, landing on the Moon wouldn't be difficult. The hard part was finding traces of the ancient war on the Moon. Exploring the Moon must be difficult, right? Yeah, if we just landed there and dug up some dirt, we could do that. But exploring it in all its aspects is impossible. I suddenly want to go to the Moon, kid. Go to bed. Dreams are full of dreams. The live stream was buzzing with comments, all expressing their desire to explore the Moon. Lin Feng saw the audience start discussing the Moon, and his lips curled up. He knew everyone was interested, and that was all that mattered. The first step of the plan was complete, and the next step was the second. Then, Lin Feng signaled for everyone to quiet down. Then, he said, well, today's lecture ends here. Thank you all for your support. In addition, let me say one more thing. We have now entered an extraordinary era. And with the awakening of these ancient characters, the future will undergo earth-shaking changes. Maybe, after all the ancient characters have revived, the ancient world may very likely reappear, and then we may be able to learn their abilities. As soon as these words came out, everyone in the room was shocked. Chapter 61. The lecture is over and the principal decides on a manned moon landing plan. Chapter 61. The lecture concluded, and the principal decided on a manned lunar landing. 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 61. The lecture concluded, and the principal decided on a manned lunar landing. Everyone was filled with disbelief. A few seconds later, a heated discussion broke out. Professor Lin, is this true? Fuck. I remember even the Buddha said the same thing. Yeah, when did he say that? Why haven't I heard of it? Go away, go away. If you haven't heard of it, it means you haven't paid attention to this matter at all. If that's true, that's great, that's right. I'm so excited. The audience was in an uproar of discussion. Lin Feng smiled, extended his hand, and pressed it down, signaling for silence. When silence settled, he said, well, everyone, thank you for attending this lecture. See you next time. With that, Lin Feng waved goodbye and walked off the podium. The audience erupted in applause, thunderous. Everyone clapped with excitement. Because the information Lin Feng presented this time was truly shocking. The lecture ended with thunderous applause. But Lin Feng didn't leave immediately. He was surrounded by a group of professors and scholars. These excited old men pushed the reporters who had originally wanted to interview Lin Feng back to the back. Professor Lin, how do you know that Earth was called the Great Continent in ancient times? Can you tell me more about the evidence supporting the claim that the Moon is a fragment of the Great Continent? Professor Lin, how confident are you that traces of the ancient war can be found on the Moon? Professor Lin, are you acquainted with that Monkey King? If we can find traces of the ancient war on the moon, then that means you're right, and since the moon has never had any signs of human life, can we find other clues there? Yes, your theory is possible. But the prerequisite is that we can find traces of the ancient war and prove that the moon is a fragment of the great continent. These highly educated old men chattered, one after another. But they all used the honorific you, which showed that in their eyes, Lin Feng was a remarkable person. Their ideas were diverse and varied. Though old, their imaginations remained fertile. In fact, from the perspective of all of China, these people might be the very pillars that make human society stronger. Lin Feng greatly admired them. But of course, he wouldn't elaborate on many things right now. He paused, then interrupted their questions with a smile, saying, I can't answer these questions for now, as I don't have much evidence. However, if traces of ancient wars can be confirmed on the moon, then my speculation would be correct. The Earth was enormous in ancient times, and the moon is merely a fragment. This would be a discovery of great significance. Upon hearing this, everyone remained silent, their thoughts lingering. A moment later, when they regained consciousness, they discovered that Lin Feng had already left. Everyone's gaze shifted to Principal Zhao Songgang. They all shared a common thought. Now it all depended on what Zhao Songgang had to say. You have to know that at a world-renowned institution like Wukong University, Zhao Songgang holds a very high official position and holds considerable influence in the academic world. Furthermore, many elite students come from Wukong University. And those elite students are currently serving in various confidential departments in China. If they all work together, it would be an extremely powerful force. Zhao Songgang saw the gazes of his colleagues. He understood what they were thinking. Yet, he hesitated. After all, the matter was too huge. And with current technology, it would probably be difficult to achieve. However, just then, a cell phone rang. Zhao Songgang pulled out his phone. It was the president of the neighboring Jingcheng University calling. He was slightly startled. Calling me at this hour? Could it be? He guessed the other party's intention. Immediately, he smiled, made a decision, and said to his colleagues, Notice, I will be meeting with the Jingcheng University staff in the 5th floor conference room. Zhao Songgang had already made up his mind to apply to the country to build a rocket, land on the moon, explore its entire surface, and search for traces of the ancient war. This is a discovery of profound significance. And if confirmed, perhaps we'll find even more clues about the prehistoric era. With that, he answered the phone. Hello, this is Zhao Songgang. Zhao Songgang walked while speaking to the president of Jingcheng University. The professors and scholars around him were all excited. Half an hour later, nearly 100 people sat in the large conference room. These were arguably the most influential figures in China's various fields. Software engineering, aerospace, information technology, history, and so on. These top minds in China gathered in this room. Zhao Songgang and the president of Jingcheng University sat in the middle of the conference table. Zhao Songgang glanced around, seeing no one else had entered. He said, Are you all here? Let's begin this meeting. He straightened the manuscript on his desk and added, The purpose of this meeting is to address what Professor Lin Feng has mentioned. We're going to send a manned mission to the moon to explore for traces of the ancient war. As soon as this was spoken, everyone understood. Zhao Songgang added, Furthermore, this must be done as soon as possible to prevent other countries from surpassing us in lunar exploration. The other countries Zhao Songgang was referring to were the United States. You all gathered here for the first time in history. I believe that with our combined strength, we will surely have the opportunity to accomplish the miracle of a manned lunar landing. The professors and scholars' faces flushed with excitement, especially after hearing these words, and hearing that they might be involved in this momentous event. Their hearts were filled with passion. China has endured countless hardships since the turn of the century. This time, they will regain glory and perhaps even lead the world forward. How could this not be exciting? Regarding this matter, the dean of our school's School of Astronautics is aware of the latest developments at NASA, the president of Jingcheng University said after Zhao Songgang finished. Then, he looked to an elderly man to his right and said, Old Guo, please tell us. Yes, Professor Guo was the dean of Jingcheng University's School of Astronautics and also worked at NASA, having made significant contributions to China's space program. He pushed his glasses and said, The space agency will launch a rocket for the moon exploration program soon. If we want to hurry up, then this is an opportunity. The president of Jingcheng University had already known about this situation, so his expression remained unchanged. However, The president of Wukong University, Zhao Songgang, and his group were all shocked. Immediately, they reacted and smiled excitedly. Isn't this perfect? Yes. The time, the place, and the people are all right. Ha ha ha. This is too coincidental. No, rather than saying it's a coincidence, it's better to say that the national destiny has arrived. Yes. That's right. Chapter 62 Manned Lunar Landing Plan. Chapter 62, Manned Lunar Landing Plan, 2024-08-19 Author, Guigui Monster. Chapter 62, Manned Lunar Landing Plan. Everyone present was thrilled. Zhao Songgang immediately said, I'll apply to the higher-ups for this matter. I'm sure they'll approve. Everyone agreed. If traces of the ancient war were truly discovered on the moon, the significance would be immense. There was no way they wouldn't agree. The president of Jingchang University thought for a moment and said, we need to come up with a plan now to ensure this plan is foolproof. Yes, Professor Guo, the dean of the School of Astronautics, nodded. Achieving a comprehensive lunar exploration is no easy task. Then, everyone began to discuss, each expressing their opinions, then summarizing them, and finally analyzing and discussing them. After 7 or 8 hours of discussion, and well into the night, the plan was finally finalized. It was pitch black outside, but the lights were brightly lit in the conference room. And no one's face showed fatigue, only excitement and fervor. Zhao Songgang, president of Wukong University, held a copy of the finalized plan in his hands. A smile spread across his face as he said, that's all for now. I'll read it out. If there are any omissions or additions, please speak up. After that, Zhao Songgang began to read out, Point 1, this space program must carry out manned aviation. After all, data detection is not as good as on-site inspections. Many precise actions and on-the-spot contingency situations are not something that machines can do. Point 2, the speed of the space program must be fast. Relying on the lunar exploration rocket of the NASA, we have to make major modifications to the rocket within 20 days. Point 3, the search coverage area is very large, and the astronauts will be wearing spacesuits on the moon for a long time, so the spacesuits and the life support systems of the lunar module must be guaranteed. 4th, 5th, 27th point, 20 days later is the best launch time. We must launch within the original schedule of the NASA. Regardless of weather or orbital issues, 20 days later is the best time and cannot be delayed. There are a total of 27 key points, and many issues have been taken into consideration in detail. This is enough to prove how rich knowledge and strong execution capabilities the people present have. After Zhao Songgang finished reading, he looked at the group and asked, anyone see anything I've missed, or anything you'd like to add? No one answered. The discussion had already been recorded. Excellent, Zhao Songgang smiled and said, everyone, this is a truly significant exploration. But we only have 20 days to prepare. However, if we uncover traces of the ancient war, it will benefit all of humanity. I'll go apply to our superiors for this plan now. Dismissed. Everyone, go back and rest. With that, Zhao Songgang stood up and hurried off. But everyone present was thrilled and excited. They were all participants in this project. Zhao Songgang didn't wait until dawn, but instead visited his superiors that very night to explain the situation. This showed how excited he was, and how eager he was to implement it quickly. Upon hearing the idea, his superiors also thought it a bit crazy. But after some consideration, they agreed. After all, this was a matter of immense significance. Orders were issued from the capital overnight, and the relevant departments began to work. Furthermore, space agencies across the country were dispatching technical personnel to Beijing to implement this plan. One night passed. Under the operation of the state machinery, the plan was already in full swing. And online, Lin Feng's lecture video had gone viral. There were full versions, as well as heavily edited versions. Of course, the edited versions only contained the important parts. These videos sparked heated discussions among netizens. Lin Feng's lecture contained quite a few explosive revelations. For example, the Tathagata Buddha was a Buddhist belief, and Buddhism should worship him, not the current generation. There was also the fact that Sun Wukong later became a Buddhist. And, most explosively, Earth was known as the Great Desolate Continent in ancient times. Back then, the Great Desolate Continent was boundless. But then, something unknown happened, perhaps a great war, shattering the Great Desolate Continent. Some of the fragments crumbled, while others flew across the universe. The moon could be one of those fragments. This news sparked heated discussion online. Fuck, is this news true or false? I don't know. Was the Earth originally called Honghuang continent? And its area is boundless. Isn't this too shocking? Honghuang. Honghuang. Fuck, I feel like these two words are unusual. There's a special feeling. Yes. I feel so too. That's not important. What's important is, are there really traces of ancient battles on the moon? If Professor Lin's inference is correct, a major battle took place in Honghuang continent, which shattered Honghuang continent. Then it is really possible that there are traces of a major war left on the moon. Because there is no one on the moon, unlike our Earth, the stars have moved, the world has changed, the years have passed, and humans have multiplied and thrived. The traces of the battle at that time have long been covered or destroyed by human traces. Yes. What the above people said makes sense. Fuck. After listening to what you said, I want to go to the moon more and more. Me too. Ha ha ha. Stop dreaming. We can go to the moon now, but it's only by machines. It's impossible to carry people. But even if machines can go up, it is impossible to fully explore the moon. Yeah, netizens were abuzz with discussion, all clamoring to visit the moon. Consequently, this topic quickly topped the trending search lists on major platforms. Netizens, when will a manned lunar landing be possible? Is Professor Lin of Wukong University's speculation true? China Aerospace, work on it. And just as the internet was buzzing with discussion, the China Space Administration posted a Weibo post that instantly sent shockwaves across the internet. The post was titled, "We've received everyone's prayers, and we are currently working hard to realize our vision of a manned lunar landing." The content read, "Yesterday was an extraordinary day. Professor Lin Feng of Wukong University explained a major event. In ancient times, Earth was known as the primordial continent. Its area was immense, and perhaps a major battle later shattered it. Professor Lin Feng speculated that the moon was likely one of the fragments, and he also speculated that there might be traces of the primordial era on the moon. Therefore, the nation made the impromptu decision to create a manned lunar landing, land on the moon, and conduct a comprehensive exploration of the moon, searching for traces of the primordial era. We are currently intensively developing this product, and any new developments will be announced on our official website. Please do not believe any rumors." This Weibo post was short, only about 200 words. And as is often the case in China, the fewer words, the bigger the story. So, as soon as this post went out, it instantly shocked the entire internet. Holy crap! Chapter 63 is hotly discussed on the entire internet, Lin Feng's successful layout. Chapter 63, the whole network is hotly discussing, Lin Feng has successfully laid out his plan, 2024-08-19 author, Good Monster. Chapter 63, the whole network is hotly discussing, Lin Feng has successfully laid out his plan. Netizens are excited, and they can't believe it. This news is really too sudden. For a time, they have been commenting, "Oh shit. This is explosive news, is this true or false? Why do I find it hard to believe it, or am I dreaming? This is officially released by NASA, how could it be false?" That's right. Besides, you can't even dream of such a thing. Ha ha ha, that makes sense. Oh shit, that's awesome. The country is so quick. Yeah, Professor Lin gave a lecture yesterday, and the country made a decision today. It has to be fast. This is something of great discovery significance. Is there a possibility that the country made a decision overnight? Anyway, this is a good thing. Where can I sign up for the manned lunar landing program? I want to be an astronaut, and I want to explore the moon myself. Yes, I want it too. I can even sign a waiver. I want to go down in history. Okay, forget it. Astronauts have to go through a lot of training to become one. You can't just become one if you want to. As soon as this Weibo post was posted, it became the #1 hot search in less than 10 minutes. Furthermore, news platforms responded to the national call and rushed to report on the event. Even major universities began broadcasting announcements. With this kind of publicity, within half a day, nearly everyone in the country knew about the event. This was perfectly normal. After all, this was a matter of immense significance, and the nation needed to know. Thanks to the Chinese government's promotional efforts, the news also spread to overseas websites, where it also sparked an uproar and discussion. Netizens from France and Chicken, "Oh my god, China is making such a big move." Netizens from Great Ying, "It's hard to understand. They are going to such great lengths to carry out a manned moon landing just for a professor's speculation." Netizens from China, "Then don't understand. How can you people know how meaningful it would be if traces of the primitive times were really found on the moon? Netizens from China, that's right, netizens from Sakura, I don't think you can find anything. The professor just speculated and didn't produce any substantial evidence. Besides, this kind of thing is too outrageous. So, you may not find anything in the end. Netizens from Sakura, ha, what are you trying to persuade them for? Let them act stupid. Netizens from China, you know shit. Several things Professor Lin said have come true, and what he said sometimes was said by people in ancient times after they woke up. For example, Tathagata Buda, netizens from China, don't argue with them, they are a bunch of idiots. They have no idea how much Professor Lin means to us in China now. US netizens, ha, China is actually planning a manned lunar landing too? Stop kidding, can you even do it? US netizens, that's right, don't waste your energy. So far, only the US has achieved a manned lunar landing. Russian netizens, this is killing me. Still talking about your US manned lunar landing? Isn't that a hoax? Everyone knows it, only you Americans don't know it. Chinese netizens, ha. China. Lin Feng sat under the pavilion. Today was a clear, cloudless day. Even during the day, the outline of the moon could be seen. Lin Feng gazed at the moon with a smile on his face. He had seen the information online and learned about the situation back home from Zhaosonggang. Everything is ready. Now all that's left is the layout for the moon, Lin Feng said with a smile. The random task issued by the system was to have Yangjian dug out from the moon. So, everything he had done before was to arouse China's curiosity about the moon. And now, he had accomplished it. The country is preparing to develop a manned lunar landing system for comprehensive lunar exploration. His final move is to create traces of the prehistoric continent on the moon. System, open them all. I want to purchase a character. With that, a virtual panel appeared, displaying various character cards. Search for Erlang Shen Yangjian's character card, Lin Feng said. Yangjian's character card popped up. He wielded a three-pointed, double-edged sword, clad in silver-white armor, and sported 3 eyes. Far from looking strange, he was handsome, his gaze deep and resolute. Below the character card was the required shock value. A total of 150,000 shock values. Purchase Yangjian's character card, Ling. Purchase successful. Congratulations on obtaining the Yangjian Level 1 role-playing card. Immediately, the virtual panel displayed the personal attributes, name, Lin Feng, character cards, Sun Wukong, Tathagata Buda, Erlang Shen Yangjian, role-playing points, Sun Wukong 4078 points, Tathagata Buda 889 points, Erlang Shen Yangjian currently has no points. Note, role-playing points cannot be transferred between characters. Points earned for a character can only be used for that character. Shock points. 25,382 points. Note, shock points can be used to purchase items in the store, including but not limited to mythical character cards. I had over 170,000 before, but after buying Yangjian, I still have over 20,000 shock points left. I should think about building something to place on the moon as a reminder of the ancient prehistoric continent. Lin Feng has already purchased Yangjian's character card, but he still needs to purchase an immortal palace or some other structure to place on the moon as a reminder of the prehistoric continent. This will only confirm his claims and create a greater sense of shock. Lin Feng selects the immortal palace page of the system store. The last system upgrade added more than just character pages, other pages have also been added. The immortal palace category boasts numerous buildings from the prehistoric era, including cave dwellings like the Slanting Moon 3 Stars Cave, Flower Fruit Mountain, and 5 Zhuang Temple, as well as mountain gates like the Penglai 3 Immortal Islands, Biao Palace, and Kunlun Mountain, some of which even contain gate formations. Furthermore, these immortal palaces possess abilities from the prehistoric era. For example, they boast rare and precious animals, exotic flowers and fruits, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Once these items were exchanged for, they would surely create an awe-inspiring spectacle. However, these items were prohibitively expensive, often costing hundreds of millions or even tens of millions of shock points. Lin Feng currently only had a little over 20,000 shock points, so he could only gaze upon them and not exchange them. My wallet is tight. I don't have enough shock points. Lin Feng shook his head helplessly. It seemed he needed to work harder and earn more shock points. The good news was that he only needed to create a trace of the prehistoric continent on the moon. So a cheap immortal palace building would suffice, nothing so lavish as that was necessary. Lin Feng browsed through the merchandise in the mall. From tens of millions, to millions and hundreds of thousands, and then to tens of thousands. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he spotted a product. This one's good. It's cheap, but if used well, it can have a great effect. Lin Feng grinned and looked up at the silhouette of the moon. Next, I should find a time to start construction. Chapter 64 Chen Haitian comes to Tony for help. Chapter 64, Chen Haitian comes to Tony for help. 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 64, Chen Haitian comes to Tony for help. This lunar exploration mission is scheduled to be launched at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. Since this mission involves a manned lunar landing, the existing rocket will require significant modifications. First, the energy source must be changed. After landing, sufficient fuel must be available for a safe return to Earth. Second, the space capsule's life support system must be enhanced to ensure the astronauts can survive there for a long period of time. Exploring the moon will take time. Finally, the space suits also need enhanced life support systems and a power supply. In a vacuum environment, wearing bulky space suits makes movement difficult. Without a power supply, astronauts will easily tire, making lunar exploration impossible. Furthermore, there are many other challenges, both large and small. The Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center has already mobilized numerous industry technicians and professors from across the country to conduct research. However, they still lack manpower. Furthermore, many challenges remain unsolved. Time is running out, there are only 19 days left. Therefore, the only option was to send these and other difficult issues to the various relevant departments, hoping to pool their wisdom and see if they could be overcome. Ministry of State Security. Chen Haitian watched the video of Lin Feng's lecture, a look of astonishment and confusion on his face. He had attended the lecture in person, but watching it again, he still felt astonished and incredulous. How did he know all this? This is truly intriguing, Chen Haitian muttered, frowning slightly. He had researched Lin Feng's identity, and there was nothing unusual about him, he was just a folk history enthusiast. But how could a folk history enthusiast know all this? Chen Haitian pondered for a moment and decided to find a time to visit Lin Feng in person. Ding-ling-ling. Ding-ling-ling. Just then, a phone rang rapidly. Chen Haitian reached for the receiver, put it to his ear, and said, "Hello, this is Chen Haitian. Director Chen, a document will be delivered to you shortly. It's about the manned lunar landing plan. We need Tony Stark's help. Go talk to him," a voice came from the receiver. A manned lunar landing? Chen Haitian was stunned. Then he realized that the scientists at NASA had run into a problem and had come to Tony Stark for help. Chen Haitian replied, "Yes, I understand." The other party hung up. Chen Haitian replaced the receiver, a thoughtful expression on his face. He didn't know what the problem might be. But if it came to Stark, it had to be a big one. However, Chen Haitian had agreed to Tony join the Chinese Supernatural Department in the hope that his brilliant mind could contribute to China. Otherwise, why would he have agreed to let him join? Chen Haitian waited a moment. Knock, knock, knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. "Come in." With that, the door opened, and a subordinate walked in. He was holding a folder and anxiously said, "Report, an urgent document from above, requiring our immediate execution." "I understand." Chen Haitian stood up, took the document, and left. In the laboratory, Tony was working on the new reactor. The previous severe palladium poisoning left a deep impression on him. However, time was of the essence, forcing him to continue using that reactor. Now, with time, he could try to develop a new elemental reactor. Of course, Tony actually wanted to study the power wielded by Sun Wukong, Tathagata Buda, and others, and see if he could master it himself. However, since he couldn't even see them, there was no way. "Stark," a voice called from behind him. Tony turned and saw Chen Haitian hurried over, a folder in hand. "Director Chen, what can I do for you? I need your assistance." "What is it?" "China is planning a manned space mission to the moon for comprehensive exploration. Are you aware of this?" Yes, this news had been widely reported online, and Tony was naturally aware of it. He had also been thinking about visiting the moon to see if there were indeed any traces of the prehistoric continent. Suddenly, Tony realized what Chen Haitian was talking about. "We're having some trouble with the manned lunar landing rocket. Take a look and see if you have any ideas or thoughts." With that, Chen Haitian handed the folder to Tony. Just as I expected, Tony thought. Then, while removing his rubber gloves, he said, "Put the file over there for now. I don't like accepting things handed to me." Chen Haitian didn't understand what was going on, but without giving it much thought, he put the file on the table next to him. Tony washed his hands, came over, picked up the folder, and began to read. The more he read, the deeper his frown deepened. After a long pause, he finished, put the file away, and said to Chen Haitian, "Director Chen, you're facing an energy supply problem, right?" "Yes." Chen Haitian also looked at the file. It said it was an energy supply problem, meaning they didn't know what kind of energy source would be best. He asked, "Do you have any good ideas?" Tony knew that if he joined the Chinese supernatural department, he had to make a difference, or they wouldn't keep him. So, he said, currently, conventional energy sources, such as high-purity fuel, can provide enough power for a rocket to reach the moon. However, this fuel is too heavy and a burden. Since we're building a manned rocket, it requires a lot of equipment. Therefore, reducing weight is essential. Furthermore, conventional energy sources are insufficient to support the daily operations of the space capsule, including the SpaceX life support system and kinetic energy device. And being so far away on the moon, regular resupply is impossible. Regular resupply consumes too much energy, requiring a rocket launch every few days. Using the sun for energy wouldn't work either, as the landing site wouldn't always have sunlight. Furthermore, the moon's temperature can reach -120–180 degrees Celsius, freezing a person into an ice sculpture, so a constant energy source is essential. Chen Haitian's analysis made sense. However, the scientists must have considered these issues, otherwise, they wouldn't have bothered with the energy source. He asked Tony, "Then do you have any good energy methods?" "Yes." Tony nodded, then pointed to the reactor on his chest and said, "Use this to provide energy." Chen Haitian's eyes lit up instantly, looking at the reactor on Tony's chest. "Yes, why didn't I think of this? This is a good thing." However, before Chen Haitian could be happy for 3 seconds, Tony's words were like a cold water poured on him. "However, this current reactor won't work. If too much energy is released, the palladium element will be released uncontrollably along with the energy. This will radiate the human body and cause palladium poisoning. Therefore, I need to develop a new reactor." Chapter 65 The Way Energy is Provided. Chapter 65 Ways of Providing Energy, 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster Chapter 65 Ways of Providing Energy. Palladium poisoning? Chen Haitian couldn't help but think of the Tony he saw that day. His face was pale, the blood vessels under his neck were all black, he was extremely weak, and he looked like he was going to die at any time. After that, Tony told Chen Haitian that he was suffering from severe palladium poisoning. Chen Haitian thought about it and felt that such a reactor was indeed not suitable as a way of providing energy. He asked again, "How long will it take you to develop a new reactor?" "We plan to launch a lunar exploration rocket in 20 days. Tony pondered for a moment and said, 10 days. "If 10 days doesn't work, I will think of other ways to provide energy." "Okay," Chen Haitian nodded, "I'll leave this matter to you." After that, he turned and left. But then, Tony's voice rang out from behind him, "By the way, Chief Chen, I've invited a friend to join the extraordinary organization with me. He's a very talented physicist." "Okay," Chen Haitian turned around and said, "but I need to verify his qualifications." "You understand what I mean, of course." Tony smiled. United States. New York was essentially destroyed. The Statue of Liberty was completely torn apart. The explosion of the power source of an aerospace carrier is no joke. "Nick," Pierce angrily shouted at Nick, "what the hell is going on? Didn't you say your Avengers plan would work?" Nick had several band-aids on his face and his broken arm bandaged. He said, "Who could have imagined that the Mandarin would use the Tesseract to open a space tunnel, allowing alien civilizations to invade Earth?" "That's not the point," Pierce shouted angrily. "The point is that you misjudged the Mandarin. You didn't understand what the Mandarin was going to do with the Tesseract, indirectly causing the crash of the aerospace carrier and destroying the entire city of New York. Do you have any idea how serious that loss was?" Nick remained silent. He hadn't imagined that even after fleeing, he would still be targeted and misunderstood by Sun Wukong, leading to his destruction of the aerospace carrier. Seeing Nick's silence, Pierce was furious. But there was nowhere else to vent his anger except on Nick. He couldn't go after Sun Wukong, right? Would that be asking for trouble? The more Pierce thought about it, the more angry he became. This feeling of having to swallow his anger was truly frustrating. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him. He asked, "Is there any news on Tony Stark yet?" "No," Nick replied. "And I asked Miss Pepper, the CEO of Stark Industries, and she also said there's no trace of Stark and she's sending people to look for him." Pierce paused, then said, "Could he have died in Hong Kong?" "I don't think so." Nick frowned, his only remaining eye itched. The Tathagata Buddha resurrected all the dead back then. If Stark had died, he would have been resurrected as well. Pierce thought this made sense. If that's the case, then we must find him. You know what Stark Industries means to the United States, and he holds the Iron Man suit and the technology for the miniature reactor. These are invaluable things, I understand, Nick said. In fact, he had been sending people to search for Tony Stark's whereabouts, but there was no news. Pierce paused, then added, "Who knows who that Lin Feng is in China?" A single lecture has galvanized China into a manned lunar landing, an exploration of the lunar landscape, and a search for traces of the prehistoric continent. We've investigated Lin Feng's identity and found him to be a folk history enthusiast. Nothing special, Nick replied. Isn't that just a folk charlatan? Pierce laughed at this and said, have Chinese scholars died out? Or have the appearances of Sun Wukong and Tathagata Buddha led them to blindly believe these unfounded claims? They claim the moon is a fragment of the prehistoric continent, and that there must be traces of the prehistoric continent on it. There's no real evidence for this, just speculation, and yet the Chinese believe it? It's hilarious. Don't go to all that trouble, finally land a man on the moon, and then, after a thorough exploration, find nothing. Pierce's words had a basis. With the current level of American technology, while they couldn't fully observe the moon, they could still observe some. Judging from all this, the moon couldn't possibly be a fragment of the great desolate continent. Seeing Pierce smile, Nick relaxed a little. He'd previously witnessed the abilities of Sun Wukong and Tathagata Buddha, and had begun to believe such fanciful notions. But the idea that the moon was a fragment of the great desolate continent was ridiculous, with no real basis, so he didn't buy it either. However, he'd be happy to see China's efforts go in vain. That would be fascinating. Ding-ling-ling. Ding-ling-ling. Just then, a cell phone rang, as if signaling something urgent. Pierce looked at Nick. Nick quickly picked up the phone on the table, answered it, and said, "Hello, this is Nick Fury, Chief. Something terrible has happened. Robert Bruce Banner has escaped from prison." Hiss. Nick took a breath, then, his expression growing serious, he asked, "Have you found any trace of him?" "No, we don't know where he went." Nick's face darkened. "If he'd escaped, if we knew where he was, we could still recapture him. But without a trace, that was a problem." Without giving it any further thought, he said, "Okay, I'll come right over." With that, he hung up. Pierce noticed a change in Nick's expression and frowned, asking, "What happened?" "Banner escaped from prison," Nick said. "Banner?" Pierce's eyes flickered with confusion. But then, he remembered who it was, and his expression suddenly changed. "That Hulk." "Yes." Pierce's scalp tingled. He knew Banner's identity. He was a super genius, a physicist. But he also had another identity, one that was extremely dangerous, the Hulk. The Hulk was incredibly violent and destructive. If he escaped into the city, who knew how much damage he would cause? "Quick, catch him as soon as possible," Pierce ordered hastily. "Yes," Nick replied. China, Beijing. At the gate of the newly established paranormal department, a foreigner rode up on a shared yellow scooter and stopped at the entrance. The foreigner looked up at the department in front of him and muttered, "This must be the place Miss Pepper is talking about." He was Dr. Banner. With Pepper's help, Dr. Banner had escaped the United States and arrived in the Chinese capital. All of this was Tony's order. Dr. Banner had been terrified on the way here, worried that he might be provoked into transforming into the Hulk and wreaking havoc. Fortunately, the journey was uneventful, allowing him to reach his destination safely. Dr. Banner parked his shared bike and walked forward, but was stopped by the agent on guard. "Stop. No access to this important department. Please leave." Dr. Banner figured that since Tony Stark needed his help and had him here, he must have a purpose. "So," he said truthfully, "I'm here to see Tony Stark." "Tony Stark?" The agent frowned. Tony Stark and Thor's joining the Supernatural Bureau was a highly confidential matter, known only to very few. The agent looked Dr. Banner up and down, and just to be on the safe side, he said, "Isn't he in the United States?" How could he be in China? Let's go. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 66 Excited Tony. Chapter 66, Tony's Excitement 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 66, Tony's Excitement. Banner was bewildered upon hearing this. But he had fled to China from the United States and had never met Tony, so there was no way to prove that Tony had invited him here. And there was another problem. The United States seemed unclear about Tony Stark's situation and where he was. Some even believed he had died in the alien invasion of Xiangjiang City. Banner stopped thinking. Since the other party said so, he should leave here first. What if he got upset here and turned into the Hulk, hurting others? It would be bad. Anyway, if Tony Stark didn't wait for him, he would probably come looking for him. With this thought in mind, Banner said, "Okay," then he turned and walked away. But just then, an English voice came from behind him. "Are you looking for Stark?" Banner heard this and turned to see a middle-aged man dressed in a suit and trousers, dressed like a secret agent. Although he didn't know who the man was, the fact that he asked such a question must mean he knew something. Banner nodded and said in English, "Okay, I'll come find him." Chen Haitian had just left Tony's place when he saw someone coming for him. But when he saw Banner's face, he gasped, startled. "It's him, Dr. Banner." As the head of the Ministry of National Security, Chen Haitian naturally knew some of America's secrets, including Dr. Banner's situation. Dr. Banner, a superstar physicist, was exposed to gamma rays, giving rise to his alter ego, the Hulk. The Hulk was powerful, violent, and incredibly destructive. At this thought, Chen Haitian realized something else. Could this be the person Stark was talking about? Chen Haitian pondered it and felt it was very likely. Banner, seeing the visitor's surprised reaction, realized they might know his identity, otherwise they wouldn't react that way. Feeling a little nervous, fearing arrest, he quickly stated his purpose. "Stark invited me here. He said he's had a problem." Chen Haitian thought, it must be the problem with the new elemental reactor. He said, "In that case, come with me." "Okay." Back in the lab, Chen Haitian said to Tony's busy back, "Stark, someone's here to see you." Tony heard the voice, turned around, and saw Banner standing next to Chen Haitian. His eyes lit up, and he quickly took off his gloves, walked over, extended his hand, and said with a smile, "Hello, Dr. Banner." "Hello." Banner extended his hand and shook Tony's. However, he seemed a little reserved and inferior. This was normal. After all, he had the Hulk inside him. And no one liked the Hulk, so he felt inferior because of it. "Relax a little," Tony smiled. This was his first time meeting Banner. However, he had known about Banner for a long time. Banner also forced a smile. Tony then got down to business, addressing Chen Haitian. "Director Chen, I've asked Dr. Banner to help me. Can he join the Supernatural Administration?" "Yes." "Does he need to undergo a qualification check?" "No," Chen Haitian said with a smile. "We Chinese have an old saying, if you employ someone, trust him. If you doubt him, don't employ him." Since it was Dr. Banner, he couldn't be a spy sent by the United States. After all, a dangerous figure like the Hulk would always be imprisoned in the United States and would never be released. So, in this case, he must have escaped from a U.S. prison at Stark's invitation. "Yes," Tony nodded with a smile. He knew what Chen Haitian meant by the qualification check. Since they were Americans, they were somewhat concerned. But Dr. Banner's words were completely reassuring. He couldn't possibly be a spy sent by the United States. Banner was a little confused, but he understood the meaning. Chen Haitian said, "All right, you guys get on with your work." He was about to leave, but Banner stopped him. "You're just going to leave me here? You won't prepare a separate room for me?" "I'm afraid the Hulk might show up," Banner said, looking somewhat pitiful and self-deprecating. It was clear that the Hulk had traumatized him. But Chen Haitian smiled and said, "No, just try not to let him show up." Banner was shocked. He hadn't expected to be treated this way in China. He felt like he was being treated as an equal, not held against him just because he had the Hulk inside him. Chen Haitian said nothing more and turned away. In truth, he wasn't afraid of Banner losing control at all, because China had a great sage to protect him. Banner stared at Chen Haitian's back in amazement. Then, Tony patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't stare at me. What's so good about a man? Take a look at this." "Do you have any ideas?" Tony brought out a stack of blueprints. Banner came to his senses, took the blueprints, and began to examine them. But after looking at a few, he was surprised and asked, "Did you make all of these?" "Yes, incredible, Stark, you're truly talented," Banner praised. Tony smiled and said, "Do you think we can discover new elements this way?" "It's hard to say," Banner shook his head. Then, he said seriously, "But following this idea, increasing the collisions of particles should be possible." "Okay, let's give it a try," Tony said excitedly. Chen Haitian left the Supernatural Administration and drove to Lin Feng's residence. He had previously planned to visit Lin Feng, but suddenly his superiors sent an urgent document instructing him to ask Tony for help. Now that he had some free time, he decided to visit Lin Feng. Arriving at the garden where Lin Feng lived, Chen Haitian said, "Professor Lin, is Professor Lin here?" He called out a few times, and a response came from inside. "I'm coming." After a while, the door opened. Lin Feng looked outside with a bit of surprise at the familiar face. He had met Chen Haitian a few times, but only when he was acting in a role, never in person. So, to avoid surprise, he asked, "Who are you?" Lin Feng had actually planned to go to the moon tonight, but someone came to visit, so he postponed it. "Oh, I'm from the Ministry of State Security. My name is Chen Haitian." Chen Haitian smiled. "I was deeply moved by Professor Lin's lecture the other day, so I thought I'd come visit you and chat with you." "Oh, so, come in then." Lin Feng stepped aside, making way. Lin Feng poured Chen Haitian a cup of tea. Chen Haitian's eyes remained fixed on Lin Feng. He hadn't been able to get a good look at Lin Feng during the lecture, but now that he could, he still thought he was just an ordinary guy. Aside from his good temperament and handsome looks, there was nothing special about him. But this was exactly what was odd. How did he know these clues from ancient times? Chen Haitian pondered this, and after Lin Feng sat down opposite him, he said, "Professor Lin, I've actually been wondering about something." "Oh, what's it?" "We've researched your information and have a good understanding of you. So, based solely on your past experiences, it's hard for me to understand how you could know so many clues about ancient times, even to the point of deducing that the moon is a fragment of the ancient continent." Chapter 67 What if I really am a character from the prehistoric continent? Chapter 67 What if I really am from the primordial continent? 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 67 What if I really am from the primordial continent? Upon hearing this, Lin Feng understood his purpose. He smiled and said, "Why do you think that is?" Chen Haitian said, "Some people online speculate that you might also be from the primordial continent, and have now awakened." "Ha ha ha," Lin Feng laughed. "Are the online speculations so outrageous?" "Yes." Lin Feng paused, then smiled. "What if I really am?" Chen Haitian was stunned. Then, he shook his head and said, "Professor Lin, you're joking. How is that possible? The awakened figures from the primordial continent, such as Sun Wukong and Tathagata Buda, all appeared and disappeared without a trace. After Sun Wukong flew away, they investigated his direction, but he disappeared mid-flight, never landing in a human city. Therefore, it was clear that they did not live among humans. Moreover, people like them, who are powerful, mysterious, and from the prehistoric continent, cannot live with humans. Therefore, it can be inferred that Professor Lin is not a person from the prehistoric continent." Chen Haitian thought about this. However, he also saw that Lin Feng did not want to answer this question. Although Chen Haitian was curious, he did not ask any more questions. After all, he came to visit, not to interrogate, and if he dared to interrogate Lin Feng, he would probably be drowned in the saliva on the internet, and even his position would be lost. He talked about another thing. "Professor Lin, what you said in your previous lecture was that the moon is one of the fragments of the prehistoric continent, and there are very likely traces of the prehistoric continent on it. Now the country is stepping up the research and development of manned rockets, and in 18 days they will launch a landing on the moon for comprehensive exploration. What do you think about this?" Seeing that Chen Haitian changed the subject, although he didn't know what he was thinking, Lin Feng didn't think about it too much. He said, "Based on my research, there's a high possibility that there are traces of the Great Desolation continent on the moon. But this is ultimately my speculation. The true situation can only be determined by lunar exploration. The country's response has somewhat exceeded my expectations. I didn't expect a country to make such a quick decision. However, this also shows the importance the country attaches to this matter. Yes, Chen Haitian nodded in agreement. As a member of the Ministry of State Security, he was naturally aware of the country's emphasis on this matter. Lin Feng smiled again. Of course, this is also a good thing. If my speculation is confirmed, then when other characters from the Great Desolation continent awaken in the future, we will understand their era and have corresponding measures in place. This is a perfect benefit with no harm. Chen Haitian nodded. He naturally understood this principle. He continued, however, the current development of manned rockets faces significant problems, the biggest of which is the method of providing energy. This has now been handed over to Tony Stark in the United States. He plans to use reactors as a method of providing energy. However, he said that the reactors currently available have major problems. The large-scale release of energy will cause the palladium element to spread rapidly, causing radiation to the human body. Therefore, he is stepping up the development of new element reactors and using them in manned rockets as an energy source. However, he said that this is not easy. Chen Haitian did not mention that Tony had now joined the supernatural administration. After all, this was confidential. Hearing this, Lin Feng smiled and said, "Now that you mention it, I have an idea. I wonder if it will work." "What idea?" Chen Haitian asked curiously, not understanding what Lin Feng meant. Lin Feng said, "Palladium's radioactivity is unstable, so we can disregard it. We can first construct a microscopic field to observe the neutron fission process. Once it continues to fission, perhaps new changes will occur. Then, using high-voltage pulse technology, we can find a way to collide them, perhaps producing a new element. This new element might be suitable." Chen Haitian's face was filled with shock. From the moment he heard the first sentence, he knew what Lin Feng was talking about. But isn't Professor Lin a history expert? How come he also understands technology? And he's even offering advice on Tony Stark's problem. Chen Haitian was stunned and incredulous. But he didn't understand technology, so he wondered if Lin Feng's words made sense. He thought for a moment, wondering, could it be that he's trying to get me to leave here, to confirm it, and not delve into his identity for the time being? However, Chen Haitian still had a clear understanding of the priorities at this point. Although he longed to know Lin Feng's true situation, it was clear that the situation with this man's spaceflight was more important. If Tony Stark could solve the energy supply problem, then the manned rocket's problems would be largely solved. With this thought in mind, he stopped thinking and stood up, saying to Lin Feng, "Sorry, Professor Lin, I need to make a phone call." "Okay, go ahead." Seeing Chen Haitian's shocked and flustered expression, Lin Feng smiled, remaining calm. He knew Chen Haitian was going to call Tony Stark about this matter. And his original intention was the same, to get Tony to build a new reactor as soon as possible to provide energy for the manned rocket. This way, his plan would be foolproof and could be put into practice quickly. Chen Haitian quickly stood up and left the room. By the time he reached a fake hill, it was already dark. Chen Haitian pulled out his phone and called Tony Stark. Failed. Tony frowned, looking at the now destroyed crystal. He and Banner tried their previous design. It failed, and the crystal was completely destroyed. Banner, staring at the ruined crystal, was at a loss. Developing a safe, stable, and energy-efficient reactor was no easy task. After all, it was a technological revolution. Once it was developed, many other ideas and concepts could be explored. Banner looked at Tony and asked, "Tony, how many days do we have left?" While trying out their plan, Tony explained the current situation. So, he understood Tony's urgency to develop a new reactor. 9 days. If this reactor doesn't work, we'll have to consider other energy sources. Only 9 days. Banner thought it was too much. It was too short, impossible. Tony said nothing. Ling. Ding. But just then, a cell phone rang rapidly. Tony picked it up from the table and saw it was Chen Haitian calling. Tony was puzzled. Why was he calling at this hour? He answered the phone and said, "Hello, Director Chen. What's up?" "I'm doing research here, Stark. Listen to me first. I'm with Lin Feng." "Professor Lin." Chen Haitian's voice came from the phone. "Professor Lin." "Yes, Professor Lin just raised a point about the problem you're facing," Chen Haitian said quickly. "What did you say?" Tony was startled. "Professor Lin raised a point?" 222. Chapter 221, Informed by God. 222. Chapter 221. Informed by the Gods. 2024-1103. Author, Good Monster. Chapter 221. Informed by the Gods. He looked at Hashimoto Kanzuki with murderous intent in his eyes. You, a carbon-based life form, are able to disguise yourself so convincingly, making it impossible for Rog and others to discern your true identity. This is truly admirable. But this is the end. The Supreme Wisdom had already launched an attack on Hashimoto Kanzuki. However, his attack was blocked by an inexplicable energy. Hashimoto Kanzuki had originally believed that her identity had been exposed, and she was doomed. But after a long time, she felt nothing unusual and opened her eyes. A bracelet on her wrist gleamed brightly. Is this the power of the gods? Powerful, majestic, and vast, truly unfathomable. The Supreme Wisdom's voice was filled with admiration and greed. Hashimoto Kanzuki, you are lucky. However, you should also know that you can no longer stay here. A surge of energy catapulted Hashimoto Kanzuki away. Although she was unharmed thanks to the bracelet's protection, when she reappeared, the eyes of Rog and the others were filled with hostility. She knew she could no longer continue to serve as a spy. Her identity had been completely exposed by the Supreme Wisdom. Rog looked at Hashimoto Kanzuki and said, Ms. Hashimoto, trade negotiations between the U.S. government and the Sakura government will continue during this period. However, please try to stay at the Sakura delegation's residence during this period. This was in order to expel her. Hashimoto Kanzuki sighed, bowed, and left the U.S. presidential palace. At the Sakura delegation's residence, Hashimoto Kanzuki returned to her residence in a trance. Although the relationship between the United States and Sakura is no longer the same, this is a diplomatic visit after all, and the United States still gave this former ally enough face, specially arranging a 5-star hotel for the Sakura delegation to stay. Hashimoto Kanzuki's footsteps in high heels echoed in the stairwell. She felt heavy-hearted. The mission Professor Lin Feng had entrusted her with had been forced to be interrupted after meeting the Supreme Wisdom. She felt she had betrayed Lin Feng's trust, a feeling of loss unlike anything she had ever experienced. A researcher from Sakura Nation noticed Hashimoto Kanayu's dejected presence and quickly approached, asking in Sakura Nation's official language, not English, Ms. Hashimoto, are you available now? Hashimoto Kanayu glanced at him feebly, recognizing him as the researcher who had accused her of speaking for Professor Lin Feng the other day. But today, she had no time for such talk. Yes, I'm free. I just finished talking to the U.S. President. What can I do for you? The researcher replied respectfully, we have something at our research institute that we'd like to invite you over. Is it convenient for you now? The key personnel sent by Sakura Nation to the talks between the U.S. and Sakura Nation included Hashimoto Kanayu as the official deputy envoy, along with a Minister of Economic Affairs and researchers. The Minister of Economic Affairs was in charge of negotiations. While the researchers were not involved, their primary task was to interview Hashimoto Kanayu to gain a deeper understanding of the gods. Sakura Nation had never given up on its research into the gods. Even after learning that the gods on the fairy island were actually Chinese gods, they still sought to approach and study them. They had collected and studied Lin Feng's lectures on the gods, which were publicly available online, but still felt they lacked accuracy. So they hired a leading Chinese scholar to provide a precise, word-for-word translation. Since Lin Feng had never agreed to an interview, they approached Chen Haitian indirectly. In short, they spared no effort in their pursuit of divine research. Hashimoto Kanzuki wasn't opposed to this. She understood the researchers' intentions. If possible, she also wished for the Sakura kingdom to become stronger. If she could contribute to her country's efforts to study the gods, why not? She smiled and nodded. I'm free now. Come on, take me to your residence. A flicker of joy flashed in the researcher's eyes. Ms. Hashimoto, thank you for your time. My name is Kenki Amamiya, and I'm your admirer. You admire me? What's there to admire? Hashimoto Kanzuki asked as they approached. She considered herself just an ordinary secretary, prone to making mistakes. How could anyone admire her? Kenki Amamiya praised sincerely. I admire your contributions to Sakura country as a diplomatic envoy. You persuaded a prime minister to lean towards China, and even dared to speak for the Chinese government and Lin Feng, promoting people-to-people exchanges between China and Sakura country and enhancing Sakura country's international status. These are all reasons why I admire you. Hashimoto Kanayu simply smiled. Nothing, just doing my duty. but she felt a little puzzled. Was all this she did out of public interest, or out of selfish motives for Lin Feng? Lin Feng's words, "A distant relative is not as good as a close neighbor," were still fresh in her mind. Isn't it her wish to help Sakura country and China establish friendship? "We're here," Kenki Amamiya said, looking down the floor. He walked ahead and opened the door for Hashimoto Kanayu. The institute staff lined up to welcome Hashimoto Kanayu. Hashimoto Kanayu looked at the room, which was filled with white-haired elders, and felt a surge of emotion. The leading elder trembled slightly as he pulled out a sheaf of materials. "Ms. Hashimoto, this is all we've collected so far, Professor Lin Feng's lecture notes on theology. These are all we have. But with only materials and no real examples, we can't determine the specific form of a deity. Since you've spent time with the Avengers, your understanding of deities should be more comprehensive than ours. I hope you could explain it to us, please." Hashimoto Kanayu nodded happily. She took the notes from the elder and glanced at them. "What we need most right now is real examples. If there's a chance in the future, I'll try to get Professor Lin Feng to take me to the fairy island. Now, I'll explain some of the things you don't understand, so please feel free to ask," but she still felt uncertain. Although she had verbally promised to try to get Lin Feng to take her to the fairy island, considering Lin Feng's attitude toward the Sakura kingdom, whether he could actually do it was unrealistic. Her promise was, in essence, nothing more than a blank check. The old man had already begun asking questions. "Ms. Hashimoto, could you explain the three-level theory of life in detail?" Lin Feng's lecture had mentioned a hierarchy of life, commonly referred to in academia as the three-level theory. This was because the life forms they had directly encountered so far were divided into three levels: basic life forms like the tardigrades of quantum space, basic life forms between planets, such as plants, animals, and humans, representing the second level of intelligent life, and Dormammu, who had invaded the blue planet but was ultimately repelled, representing the third level of dimensional life capable of controlling a space of its own. Hashimoto Kanzuki nodded, gathered her thoughts, and began to explain her understanding, drawing on her own experiences and what she had heard and seen. Nearby, numerous researchers from the Sakura Kingdom began diligently taking notes. After thoroughly expounding on the knowledge of the gods to the Sakura Kingdom researchers, Hashimoto Kanzuki quietly exited the room without disturbing the diligent researchers, gently closing the door behind them. She looked up at the sky. Before she knew it, the sky had darkened. She had spent a long time in this room. She wiped the sweat from her forehead. Although the United States was in the transition between autumn and winter, the temperature inside was still warm, even a little stuffy. Hashimoto Kanayu slowly walked towards her door, whispered "I'm back," and then pushed the door open. She knew that no one in the room would respond, as she was used to being alone. However, when she opened the door and turned on the light, her eyes widened in surprise. Lin Feng was sitting on a stool, looking at her with a smile. "It's been a long time since we last met. How have you been?" Lin Feng greeted her. Hashimoto Kanayu was slightly stunned, and then subconsciously replied, "I'm fine." Then something occurred to her. "Professor Lin Feng, hasn't the draft convention been implemented?" She suddenly stopped talking mid-sentence. This was because when she was explaining it just now, she had deliberately separated Lin Feng from the image of a god to prevent the researchers from Sakura country from noticing Lin Feng's true identity. As a result, she did not realize that Lin Feng was actually a god. Lin Feng chuckled, "This is just a clone, the real body is still under supervision, but those supervisions are meaningless to me." Hashimoto Kanayu nodded, standing in place, not daring to look directly at Lin Feng. "Professor Lin Feng, I have failed to complete the task you assigned to me. I only saw the supreme wisdom." Lin Feng comforted her instead. "It's okay, as long as you are safe. The Kree people's technology is far superior to that of Blue Star. It is a rare gain for you to see the supreme wisdom." Hashimoto Kanayu thought for a while and said, "By the way, Professor Lin Feng, the supreme wisdom told me that we are carbon-based life. Can we start research from this perspective?" Lin Feng was very happy to hear this. "Of course, you see, didn't you complete this task very well? At least Dr. Banner and Stark didn't analyze this point. Don't be so restrained, sit down, we are not in a superior-subordinate relationship." Hashimoto Kanayu sat down as he said, but still deliberately kept a distance from Lin Feng. "Professor Lin Feng, what do you think our relationship should be?" Lin Feng pondered. "Colleagues seems too distant. We should be friends, right? What do you think?" Hashimoto Kanayu felt a mixture of joy and disappointment. So we're just friends? That's reassuring. She thought to herself that Professor Lin Feng, with his boundless divine power, might have seen through her feelings and declined under the guise of friendship. He was, after all, omniscient and almighty. With this in mind, Hashimoto Kanayu asked, Professor, since you are a god, why don't you take action to eliminate the Kree? The Kree were a cancer to Blue Planet. Professor Lin Feng, possessing divine power, longed for human independence, but he seemed to stand idly by. Lin Feng looked at Hashimoto Kanayu, his expression growing serious. Ms. Hashimoto, I've told you that Roger's words have always affected me. Threatening everyone with force isn't peace, it's tyranny. I hope for human independence, but only if I refrain from interfering in human affairs. Therefore, I won't proactively seek to understand your thoughts or pry into your hearts. I'll simply observe from the sidelines. As long as the Kree don't cross the line, I won't intervene. It's that simple. Hashimoto Kanayu was delighted. So, Professor Lin Feng didn't know her feelings. Did she still have a chance? She thought of the empty promise she'd made to the researchers and asked eagerly, Professor Lin Feng, if you're free, could you take me to the fairy island? No, Lin Feng's voice was unwavering. Although she had been prepared, Hashimoto Kanayu still lowered her head in frustration at Lin Feng's response. But you can go and see for yourself. Lin Feng's voice brightened again, and he smiled at Hashimoto Kanayu. Hashimoto Kanayu looked up at Lin Feng, puzzled. Lin Feng explained his ideas to her. During this period, we let the Kree see the results they wanted. I was restrained, Rogers was wanted, and Stark disappeared. On the surface, we suffered heavy losses, but in fact we were fighting back in secret. And you, Miss Hashimoto, you are the person who has been closest to the Kree, and you are also the most suitable person to take charge of the overall situation in the Avengers. Therefore, I will give you some power. Lin Feng's voice gradually became solemn, like a huge bell, deafening. Hashimoto Kanzuki, I will give you the power of God. Are you willing to accept it? Hashimoto Kanzuki looked at Lin Feng with a firm look. Professor Lin Feng, I do. Lin Feng's voice seemed to float from the clouds. Remember, don't interfere in human affairs at will, otherwise, I can take back your divine power at any time. Do you understand? Hashimoto Kanzuki nodded firmly. I understand, Professor Lin Feng. Will you regret it? Lin Feng suddenly asked. Hashimoto Kanayu shook her head. I have a clear conscience and no regrets. Lin Feng, bathed in a divine light, handed Hashimoto Kanayu a card. This is the first divine power you've received. I hope you'll use it wisely. After the light faded, Lin Feng looked at Hashimoto Kanayu. From now on, you two will be the spokesperson for the gods. However, this news is private, you know. Hashimoto Kanayu nodded like a chick pecking at rice. But she couldn't help but be curious. Professor Lin Feng, why did you choose me? Lin Feng smiled. Because you're the only one who realizes I'm a god. He then burst into laughter. Hashimoto Kanayu, startled, joined Lin Feng in laughter. In Country D, at Vienna International Airport, the disguised Rogers and his group had purchased their tickets and were about to board. The airport had been playing the daily news when a sudden, urgent news interruption shattered the stillness. Hello everyone. We are from UNESCO. At this moment, we have received a video message from Professor Lin Feng. Due to the seriousness of the situation, we will be broadcasting Professor Lin Feng's original video. Please watch it and be prepared. Passengers at the airport were discussing the situation. They all knew that Lin Feng had been unable to appear due to recent protocol restrictions, but they were curious about what incident had garnered such attention. Lin Feng's voice echoed from the screen. Everyone, I must inform you of a serious fact. There are other aliens on the blue planet we live on. Chapter 69 successfully completed. Chapter 69, successfully completed, 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 69, successfully completed. This document discusses the energy supply method and the manufacturing process for the spacesuit. After reading it, all the scientists were shocked, their scalps tingling with shock, as if something had just clicked. Wow! Incredible! This method can actually be used. Yes! This energy supply method is perfect. Low payload, high and stable energy output, enough to support long-term exploration on the moon. Yeah, and this spacesuit design is also excellent, but it feels a bit like Tony Stark's Iron Man suit. Ha. Anyway, to come up with such a design concept, he must be a genius. Quick, Look at who signed it. As soon as the words fell, all the scientists reacted and began to search. Finally, they found the signature on the last page. But when they saw the signature, they were all stunned. It was just Lin Feng. Who was Lin Feng? I've never heard of a scientist by that name. The professor from Wukong University's history department was actually named Lin Feng. Everyone was puzzled for a moment, then noticed a line of small text beneath the signature. The core concept of this design proposal was provided by Professor Lin Feng from Wukong University's history department. Therefore, the primary authorship of this design proposal is hereby granted to Professor Lin Feng. Hiss! Everyone gasped, stunned. Professor Lin Feng, it really is Professor Lin Feng, incredible. This is truly incredible. Isn't Professor Lin Feng a history professor? How come he even has such a deep understanding of energy dynamics? Yes. He's incredible. Is this a true genius? Everyone was stunned, unable to believe this. After a long pause, a respected old professor regained his composure. He pushed his reading glasses and broke the silence, saying, "Okay, now is not the time for surprise. Time is running out. Let's vote now. Raise your hands if you agree that this energy design proposal should be implemented." As he spoke, everyone raised their hands simultaneously, without hesitation. This meant that the design proposal had won everyone's high approval. The old professor glanced at it, then raised his hand and said, "Okay, unanimously approved. Let's proceed according to this design." Time was running out, and the scientists sprang into action. With a most challenging energy supply issue resolved, and all the scientists and technicians working around the clock, the timeline for the manned lunar rocket kept shrinking. Finally, it was completely completed in just 10 days. And all the simulation data was correct, with no issues at all. The scientists and technicians were thrilled and cheered. Ha ha ha, success, done in 10 days. 10 days ahead of the planned 20, yes, we did it. A manned lunar rocket, ha ha ha, many people danced with joy, some even burst into tears. This could be considered a revolution in Chinese rocket history. And they were both participants and witnesses. Successful announcements of completion were sent out from the Quanjiu Satellite Launch Center, Wukong University. Professors and scholars from our university met with those from Jingchang University for a meeting. Today's meeting had been called unexpectedly, so no one knew what to expect. Then, the presidents of Wukong University and Jingchang University entered. Both beamed, as if they had encountered some great news. Everyone present was curious. The two presidents sat down. Zhao Songgang, president of Wukong University, said without further ado, "Everyone, we have good news from the Quanjiu Satellite Launch Center." Good news? Everyone was stunned by the words. Then, a surge of joy filled their hearts, and they asked, "What good news, President?" "Yes, could it be that the energy supply problem has been solved? If so, that's truly great news. Well, once that problem is solved, all other problems will be minor." Everyone was buzzing, discussing the good news. Zhao Songgang, upon hearing the discussion, smiled and raised his hand for silence. After everyone had quieted down, they paused. He smiled and said, "The Quanjiu Satellite Launch Center says the manned lunar rocket has been successfully completed. It's 10 days ahead of schedule, ahead of the previously planned 20 days. The moment these words were spoken, everyone was stunned. A manned lunar rocket was completed 10 days ahead of schedule? How? How could this be done? Impossible. Everyone's face was filled with disbelief. After several seconds, they began to ask, "Principal, what's going on? How could it be completed 10 days ahead of schedule?" "Yes, this is incredible. Ha ha ha, great. This way, we can carry out manned lunar exploration as scheduled." "That's right. This is a big deal, but I'm still curious. Did they say before that there were huge difficulties in providing the energy for the manned rocket? How can it be completed 10 days ahead of schedule?" Everyone was excited and chattered non-stop. After all, the successful completion of the manned lunar rocket meant that they could land on the moon and explore. However, some were also curious about the progress of the project. Why did it suddenly feel like it was taking off? Seeing the crowd's reaction, Zhao Songgang smiled and said, "It wouldn't have been possible to move so quickly, but Professor Lin Feng has overcome the biggest challenge in manned rockets, which is why the progress is so fast." Wow! This statement was met with an uproar. Everyone was astonished. It was overcome by Professor Lin Feng, and Professor Lin even knew about technology. Everyone was stunned, incredulous. Someone asked, "President, Professor Lin knows about this?" "Yes," Zhao Songyang said excitedly. However, someone else asked, then why didn't you notify Professor Lin to come? I don't think we should bother him with a meeting like this, it's not important. Let Professor Lin come after the launch is successful. That would be more meaningful, Zhao Songyang said with a smile. He had called Lin Feng before arriving to tell him about this. Everyone understood. This was just an announcement meeting, and Professor Lin didn't need to be present. However, they suddenly realized that if this were the case, then Professor Lin could be said to have single-handedly driven this manned lunar exploration project. He first suggested that there might be traces of the ancient continent on the moon, and then went on to solve the problem of manned rockets. Under these circumstances, as long as Professor Lin was willing to show up, he could almost take 90% of the credit. Hiss. Everyone thought of this and took another breath in surprise. At this time, Chen Haitian said, today's meeting is partly to announce this period, and partly to ask everyone to vote. I believe that manned lunar landing and lunar exploration is a major discovery. The results of this discovery are of great significance to Earth. Therefore, I have decided to broadcast the lunar exploration live. What do you think? 223. Chapter 222 Lin Feng, Lin Feng, how many secrets do you have hidden in you? 223. Chapter 222, Lin Feng, how many secrets do you hold? 2024-11-03 Author, Good Monster Chapter 222, Lin Feng, how many secrets do you hold? Some of them are homeless, some are friendly visits, but some are evil invaders. The gods have told me that a race called the Kree provided Thanos with space-jumping technology during his invasion, allowing him to breach the protective shield. They are now eyeing Blue Star and have used this technology to infiltrate among some UN heads of state, disguised as government officials. In an attempt to stir up global conflict, Rogers and his companions exchanged a glance. They understood that while Lin Feng's words were a warning to the residents of Blue Star, they signaled war to the Avengers and the Kree. The previous veiled struggle had escalated into open conflict, and with Lin Feng revealing the Kree's identity, the two sides were at loggerheads. While they didn't know the reason that prompted Lin Feng to hasten his declaration of war against the Kree, Rogers and his companions knew that time was running out. Where are we going next? Wanda and Pete asked. Among the group, Rogers, Sam, and Bucky were wanted criminals, while Wanda, Pete, and Patton had come to help at Lin Feng's request. There was also Scott, who yawned constantly. Hearing Wanda's question, he curiously asked, "Yes, Mr. Rogers, where's our destination?" Rogers and Bucky exchanged a glance. "Siberia? That's our final destination. We will face 5 super soldiers, an unknown enemy, and the Kree who may provide support at any time. Everyone should be mentally prepared." Everyone's faces turned solemn upon hearing this. The strength of the 5 super soldiers was self-evident, as evidenced by Rogers and Bucky. Their individual combat capabilities were astonishing. Even more serious was the possibility of the Kree providing support at any time. However, they were prepared and had no intention of retreating. At the United Nations building in Berlin, Germany, T'Challa, led by staff, entered an office. Looking at Lin Feng, who was being watched by everyone, though he didn't know what was going on, he politely asked, "Hello, Professor Lin Feng, what can I do for you?" Lin Feng handed him a mask and a set of clothing. T'Challa took them and saw that the mask bore the image of Bucky, and the clothing was similar. He felt confused, sensing something was amiss. Lin Feng spoke, "Your Majesty, the UN recently discovered Dr. Leica, who had been dead for days, in a hotel. He was responsible for conducting a psychological evaluation for Bucky. We found these at the scene of his death. Combining the footage from the time and Bucky's movements, we unanimously believe that the person who killed Dr. Leica, disguised as Bucky, was responsible for the Vienna massacre. This is Bucky's movements at the time. He was in Romania at the time, and there was no time to find him." He then handed over a document. T'Challa took it, examined it carefully, and was forced to admit that what Lin Feng said was true. Hatred had blinded him, preventing him from investigating the truth. Now, the UN had revealed the truth. He took a deep breath. "Where's the murderer? I will arrest him," but this was beyond Lin Feng's authority. Ra stepped forward at the right time and said, "Your Majesty, we understand how you feel, but we cannot tell you the location of the murderer yet. We are also unable to determine his whereabouts. We can only confirm that his name is Helmut Zemo, a Sokovia mercenary. His recent movements have appeared on Moscow Airlines, but we know nothing about his destination. At present, we can only place our hopes on Rogers and the others. T'Challa suddenly realized after hearing this. Did you plan this from the beginning? Was the wanted order for Rogers and the others just a show? Ross shook his head. Not really. We made the plan randomly after learning all the truth. We wanted Rogers and the others because they resisted arrest. We don't know Zemo's purpose, and only Bucky may know, so we chose to let it go. We chose to tell you only because you have the right to know the truth. Please keep it confidential. Please continue to hunt down Bucky until the dust settles. T'Challa understood, and combined with Lin Feng's announcement he heard this morning, he said, "This is a show, right?" Ross nodded solemnly. "Yes." T'Challa turned and left. "I have no obligation to cooperate with you." Ross was somewhat disappointed, but he didn't hold out much hope. Wakanda had only recently opened to the outside world, so it was premature to request him on behalf of the United Nations. T'Challa's voice echoed again, "But I will continue to pursue the murderer." Lin Feng smiled as he watched T'Challa leave. As expected, T'Challa was still the righteous Black Panther warrior. Disguised as the U.S. president, Rog stared at the international news on the TV screen. The sudden interruption made his eyes narrow slightly, realizing Lin Feng's vigilance against them. Clearly, since Hashimoto Kanzuki's disguise was exposed, Lin Feng was no longer content with a covert confrontation, but had chosen to directly alert his opponent. However, how much tangible effect would his strategy bring? Rog's lips curled up in a smile. After the two large-scale mass disorientation incidents caused by the Chinese divine cult and the anti-divine movement, both Lin Feng and the Chinese god's reputation on Blue Planet had declined significantly. While some still firmly supported Lin Feng, voices of doubt were also growing. Lin Feng's words no longer commanded the same level of public attention they once did. Since Lin Feng had chosen to expose the truth and attempt to alarm his opponents, Roger decided to capitalize on the situation, employing a tactic he had just learned from Chinese civilization, fishing in troubled waters. Lin Feng had already revealed the existence of other aliens on Blue Planet, he only needed to exaggerate the situation. He quickly called the spokesperson. "Did you see Lin Feng's statement? The one about the Kree? It seems too coincidental. We discovered the Skrulls just a few days ago under Nick's guidance, and Lin Feng discovered the Kree, who are opposing the Skrulls. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Is Lin Feng a Skrull? Who knows, but at least he's no ordinary person. I need you to publicize the Skrull's existence and challenge Lin Feng's claims. At the same time, mobilize those supporters within China to boycott Lin Feng and create a favorable public opinion environment for us." After hanging up the phone, Roger smiled triumphantly. However, the thought of Lin Feng's identity still gave him a headache. Hashimoto Kanzuki had nearly managed to infiltrate their ranks, leading him to speculate that the Blue Star people might have mastered the method of distinguishing between the Kree and Blue Star people. Furthermore, if it weren't for the Supreme Intelligence's warning, they might not have discovered the flaw. This suggests that the Blue Star people are also capable of using technology to disguise themselves, achieving a deceptively realistic effect. The Blue Star people, truly formidable. At this moment, Carol knocked on the door. After hearing Roger say, "Come in," she pushed it open and stepped inside. Roger saw Carol and said politely, "Carol, we need you to bravely step forward and identify the Skrulls." Carol's face paled slightly, but she nodded. "I understand." She had always been committed to hunting down the Skrulls. Now that Lin Feng had revealed the existence of the Kree, Carol, despite some resistance to him, had long harbored the idea of revealing the Skrulls. But at this moment, her enthusiasm suddenly surged. However, was such a self-defeating act truly appropriate? Lin Feng's advice was not without reason. How could she be sure the Kree were just and kind? Her memory of the past was still blank. Could this be related to Rogue and the others? Lin Feng's face floated before her, a face steeped in vicissitudes and deep sorrow. Rogue's voice rang out again. "Carol, how well do you know Lin Feng?" Carol, coming to her senses, replied, "I haven't had time to get to know him in depth. We've had some conversations, but I can't discern the energy patterns within him." Rogue sighed. "He wasn't part of our original plan. Even with Zora's algorithm, we couldn't uncover his origins. His appearance disrupted so many preconceived ideas, altering our destiny and the course of world history. Carol, to be honest, the destruction of our Kree planet was also linked to a shift in world lines. This shift in world lines can lead to a breakdown in the logic of space-time, triggering the collapse of planets and even galaxies. If Lin Feng continues to exist, it will only harm Blue Planet and not benefit it. The situation was serious, and Carol, upon hearing this, made up her mind. Regardless of whether Lin Feng was right or wrong, his existence would bring about the collapse of space-time, and therefore he could no longer exist. A smile curled the corners of Roger's mouth as he watched Carol depart. This tactic of driving away a tiger to devour a wolf was something he had learned from Chinese civilization. Since their last conversation with Lin Feng, Carol had undergone some changes. Roger remained impassive on the surface, but he was secretly mulling over how to target Carol. Now he had given Carol a reason to fight Lin Feng. When two tigers clash, one will inevitably be injured. Chinese civilization is truly profound and extensive, worthy of being a land blessed by the gods. With just his words, he had led two of the Kree's greatest threats to the conflict. His words were a mixture of truth and falsehood, so brilliant that they were impossible to disprove. Furthermore, the Kree had been destroyed long ago, leaving no witnesses. Lin Feng's appearance was indeed unexpected, and even with Zora's algorithm, they could not calculate anything related to Lin Feng. Lin Feng's presence had even unconsciously altered some things. For example, Peter Maximoff, who should have been dead by now, was accompanying Wanda, calmly awaiting their flight to Siberia at Berlin Airport, the very place where the Avengers were supposed to be fighting. However, the Kree's demise wasn't due to a shift in world lines, but rather to a mysterious force. This force, like the deity behind Lin Feng, was unfathomable. Lin Feng, how many secrets do you still harbor? Roger toyed with a coin, secretly plotting his next move. Lin Feng's mythical role-playing system was now shareable. He could share it with selected individuals, granting them the ability to play as a deity and purchase items from the item store. Of course, this presupposed that the sharer's authority could not surpass Lin Feng's, allowing him to confidently allow others to play as a deity. The first sharer was Hashimoto Kanzuki, who had discovered Lin Feng's true identity. Lin Feng said to Hashimoto Huanayu, "The divine power control I provide you uses two panels. One is the basic panel, where you can select the divine power you desire. The other is the shopping panel. After playing as a god, you can purchase costumes and props to enhance your divine majesty. Purchasing items requires accumulating a certain amount of quest points. It's your choice." Hashimoto Huanayu asked nervously, "Professor Lin Feng, can I choose a deity from the Sakura Kingdom? I'm from Sakura Kingdom and am more familiar with their gods." Lin Feng pondered for a moment. Indeed, if Hashimoto Huanayu chose a deity from the Chinese mythology system, she might not understand it and would not be able to fully unleash her divine power. Furthermore, her role-playing authority was no higher than his, so there was nothing wrong with choosing a deity from the Sakura Kingdom mythology system. He nodded in agreement. "It's up to you. I won't interfere. I've chosen you, and I trust your judgment." Hearing Lin Feng's answer, Hashimoto Huanayu felt completely relieved. She closed her eyes and concentrated, preparing to choose the deity she would play. At the same time, Lin Feng also opened up her role-playing authority for the Sakura Kingdom mythology system. Hashimoto Kanzuki couldn't see his control panel, but he could see Hashimoto Kanzuki's. He saw that Hashimoto Kanzuki, like himself, had two initial gods, one low-level and one high-level. The low-level one was Yukiana, and the high-level one was Amaterasu, the goddess of Sakura country. Hashimoto Kanzuki had S-level access to Yukiana, meaningful access, but it felt useless. A monster like Yukiana could probably be killed by Sun Wukong with a single blow. Her life level was too low, barely comparable to Thor and the others, and not even worthy of being called a true god. Lin Feng glanced at Yukiana and passed by quickly, then focused on Amaterasu. According to legend, she was the sun goddess of Sakura country, the ancestor of the emperor of Sakura country, and the inventor of Sakura country's agricultural civilization. To Lin Feng's surprise, Amaterasu's mission points were on par with Yang Jian's, meaning that Amaterasu and Yang Jian were gods of the same level. How could a tiny nation like Sakura country produce a deity that rivaled the gods of China? It truly is true that appearances alone are incomparable to the depths of the ocean. Hashimoto Kanzuki opened her eyes and said, "Professor, I've made my choice." Lin Feng smiled. "Then I won't bother you anymore. You'll still need to take care of the Avengers. I'll support you from behind." With Lin Feng's encouragement, Hashimoto Kanzuki brimmed with confidence and said with enthusiasm, "Professor Lin Feng, rest assured. I will definitely stabilize the Avengers during this period. Currently, The primary enemy is the Kree. With the three major powers out of the picture, Hashimoto Kanzuki, having accepted Lin Feng's commission, is the most suitable person to take charge of the Avengers. After Lin Feng left, Hashimoto Kanzuki opened the store panel and looked thoughtfully at his free costume. According to the Sokovia draft agreement, Lin Feng is currently on probation for 2 years, during which the surveillance team will monitor him comprehensively. Chapter 71 Countdown. Chapter 71 Countdown, 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 71 Countdown. This interstellar battleship is pitch black and has no special shape. It looks like a huge, upright sword. It is full of awe and murderous intent, as if it was built specifically for war. Hiss, Loki took a breath, shocked by the shape of the battleship. Found it, the Dark Elves battleship. After being shocked, Loki became excited. It appears here, which means my speculation is correct. In the battle that year, the Dark Elves leader Malekith was not killed. Instead, he drove the battleship and used the power of space to escape. Then, to save his life, he chose to remain silent. Loki looked excited. Immediately, he used the power of the cosmic cube. With a flash of blue light, he entered the interior of the interstellar battleship. He saw that the surroundings were pitch black, without a single sound, and a dead silence. Almost every one of these dark elves possesses immense power. However, I wonder how they compare to Sun Wukong. The scene of Lin Feng transforming into a stream of fiery red light, like a meteor, and crashing into the Chitauri's interstellar battleship that day was etched deeply in Loki's mind. However, the Dark Elves were a race that rivaled Asgard in its heyday, demonstrating their immense strength. But no matter what, I won't be invading China this time. I need a different tactic, Loki pondered as he groped his way forward in the darkness. A moment later, Loki reached the control room. He surveyed the empty space, carefully examining the bizarrely shaped instrument panels, then found the button to start the battleship and pressed it. A strange engine roar echoed throughout the ship. Lights flickered in the previously dim corridors. And suddenly, behind Loki, a hissing sound echoed. It sounded like a gas leak. Tap, 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 then, heavy footsteps echoed across the control room floor. Loki turned and saw a towering being. It was Malekith, leader of the Dark Elves. Loki smiled and said, "King of the Dark Elves, Malekith, welcome back." "Who are you?" Malekith asked, his voice heavy and vengeful. He stood nearly 2 meters tall, his skin a pale blue, giving off an air of darkness, evil, and violence. "Who I am doesn't matter," Loki smiled, delivering his prepared words. "What matters is that you've slumbered for 5,000 years. Now that the 9 realms are about to connect, it's time for you to awaken and return to the 9 realms." Malekith looked at Loki calmly, without reacting. Loki smiled again and said, "Don't you wish to find the ether?" Malekith's expression finally shifted. He was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "Do you know where the ether is?" "Yes," Malekith asked. "What do you want?" Malekith knew that there was no gain without gain, and the man before him must have some ulterior motive. "I want to rule the planet where the ether is." "Sure," Malekith said without hesitation. This showed that he recognized his own strength. And in the entire universe, as long as he put his mind to it, there was nothing he couldn't do. "Then you can tell me now, which planet the ether is on." Although Loki didn't know where the ether was, he knew his goal very well. So, he put on a cunning smile and said naturally, "On Earth." "Earth?" Malekith asked in confusion. Loki realized that Earth was not a common name among the 9 realms. He changed his words and said, "It's the Midgard." "Midgard?" Malekith pondered. The Midgard is the hub of the 9 realms. If the ether is going to appear somewhere, then the Midgard seems to be the most likely place. Thinking of this, Malekith looked up at Loki. He was wondering if the man in front of him really knew, or if he actually had another purpose and was just leading him to the Earth. But after watching for a long time, he didn't see anything unusual on Loki's face. The other party still looked sincere. Malekith retracted his gaze. The ether was extremely important to him. As long as there was a clue, he would go and look for it no matter what. Thinking of this, he said, "In that case, let's set off for the Midgard." After Malekith finished speaking, he was about to control the star battleship. But Loki hurriedly stopped him and said, "The Earth now has very powerful power. I think we should make some preparations." "Powerful power?" Malekith asked doubtfully. "Are they using the ether now?" "That's not the case," Loki said. "If that's the case, then there's nothing to worry about. The power of the Dark Elves is beyond your comprehension. A mere Midgard can easily destroy our race. Malekith said this lightly, seemingly not taking Earth seriously at all. He controlled the space battleship, breaking through the spatial barrier and speeding towards Earth. At this moment, there was still half a day before the launch of China's manned lunar landing rocket. Earth, China. The Quanzhou Satellite Launch Center was conducting a final inspection of the manned lunar landing rocket. This manned rocket was significantly different from previous rockets. It was assembled from an ordinary rocket and an aircraft-like device, one on the left and the other on the right. However, the wings of this aircraft-like device were much shorter, far less than those of an airplane. However, it exuded an interstellar and technological aura. A beautiful reporter faced the camera, excitedly introducing, "Hello everyone, this is the live broadcast room of the manned lunar landing program. Now, we can see the launch pad behind me, where hundreds of technicians and scientists are conducting final checks on the rocket. As everyone knows, this manned spaceflight is my country's first manned lunar landing. It can be said to be a technological revolution. Furthermore, judging by what Professor Lin Feng mentioned, the significance of this lunar landing is undeniable. It's currently 10:11 a.m., and the rocket launch is scheduled for 11:50 a.m. As you can see, the weather here is excellent today. The sun is high in the sky is clear, and there's not a single cloud in the sky. Does this also indicate that our lunar exploration mission will be a smooth journey?" The female reporter spoke excitedly and loudly, standing in the strong northwest wind, her heart filled with anticipation for the historic moment to come. The livestream had already been flooded with netizens, and they too were excited at the sight. "Ha ha ha, it's finally starting, holy crap, this rocket looks so different from any other rocket, nonsense, how can this be compared to any other rocket? This is a manned lunar rocket, ha ha ha, launch it quickly. Don't wait any longer, don't worry upstairs, this is a big deal, we need to check it thoroughly, yeah, this thing that's going to land on the moon, a screw error could lead to complete failure. Oh, am I the only one who noticed that the reporter is pretty, with so many people here? I secretly eat a mouthful of shit, no one should notice, right, and it's not just China. Other countries are also paying close attention to this matter. After all, this is a big deal, and it can be said to be a big deal for the Earth. As long as there is a person living on Earth, there is no one who doesn't pay attention. 224. Chapter 223 Don't judge a person by appearance. 224. Chapter 223 Don't judge a book by its cover. 2024-11-03 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 223 Don't judge a book by its cover. After the 2-year period expires, the decision to continue dispatching a team to monitor Lin Feng will be considered, based on the current situation, the treaty, and Lin Feng's own wishes. 2 years isn't a long time, but it's not a short time either. However, for the Kree, it's more than enough time to significantly advance their invasion. Lin Feng has declared war on the Kree. While all appears calm on the surface, undercurrents are surging. The Avengers and the Kree have clashed numerous times, often with swords and spears. In late autumn and early winter, the temperature plummets, and before anyone knew it, the first snow had quietly fallen. In Tokyo, the land of cherry blossoms, Prime Minister Rikuro Koizumi was watching TV in his residence, analyzing the meaning of Lin Feng's words. Then, a phone call shattered his tranquility. "Hello, who is this?" Rikuro Koizumi's voice carried a hint of displeasure, the kind that would anger anyone if they were interrupted while enjoying their leisure time. However, Koizumi Rikuro was a skilled politician, well-mannered and never overtly displayed. "Prime Minister, it's me. Look up in the sky. A snow woman has appeared." The voice on the other end of the line was filled with ecstasy and disbelief. Hearing this, Koizumi Rikuro's heart trembled, and without even bothering to put on his shoes, he hurried out of the house. A massive figure loomed in the Tokyo sky, its features blurred in the gentle white light. But as she waved her sleeves, snowflakes drifted down, showering the earth. She wore a white kimono, wooden clogs, her long hair flowing. Amidst the warm light, a frigid snowstorm descended. She was the Snow Woman, the monster in Sakura Land mythology who brought the first snow. Koizumi Rikuro stared in astonishment, incredulous. Because there had been previous instances of Chinese deities appearing, Koizumi, despite the shock of the Snow Woman's sudden appearance, reluctantly accepted the reality. Such a bizarre event was still within his comprehension. Even so, he paused for a long moment, quietly admiring the wonder of the night sky and trying to calm his excitement. It wasn't until snowflakes drifted into his nostrils, chilling him to a sneeze, that he regained consciousness. He hurried back inside, slipped on his shoes, threw on his coat, and returned to the outdoors. During this time, Koizumi Rikuro had recovered from his initial shock, a surge of delight welling up in his heart. The appearance of the Chinese god heralded China's resurgence to the pinnacle of world power. As Prime Minister of the Sakura Nation, he made a decisive move, parting ways with the United States and embracing China. This was the frustration of a small, geographically limited nation. Its economy was controlled by others, its resources were scarce, and its strategic location was awkward, forcing the Sakura Nation to play the role of a political clown in the Asia-Pacific region. However, the appearance of the Sakura Nation god instilled in him an inexplicable sense of confidence, even the illusion that he could take a seat on the UN Security Council tomorrow. The power of the gods was simple and brutal, so immense that it defied logic. The only country currently experiencing the appearance of a deity, besides China, is Sakura country. Although the United States once claimed to be protected by the heavenly wolf god, it was later revealed to be merely Yang Jian's pet dog. Koizumi Rikuro knew little about Sakura country's ancient culture, and even less about the study of theology. While the appearance of a deity from Sakura country's mythology was a huge surprise, it also led him to ponder further questions. For example, was there any connection between the Sakura country's deity and the previously revealed Chinese deity? How did the power compare? Forced to abandon the illusion that he would be able to attend the UN Security Council tomorrow, Koizumi Rikuro took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure as a politician. Snowflakes swirl across the night sky as Koizumi Rikuro returns home and calls Hashimoto Kanzuki, who is far away in the United States. Hashimoto Kanzuki's voice sounds a bit sleepy. Due to the time difference, it was just getting dark here, while Hashimoto Kanzuki was already 3 or 4 in the morning, the height of sleep. "Hello, Prime Minister, what do you want to talk to me about?" Hashimoto Kanzuki's voice was filled with sleepiness and fatigue. Koizumi Rikuro heard this and said, "Hashimoto, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but something big just happened. You should check the live broadcast in Tokyo." Hashimoto Kanzuki followed Koizumi Rikuro's instructions and turned on his computer, bringing up the live news. The massive figure on the screen shook everyone's heart. "Who is that?" Hashimoto Kanzuki's voice was filled with surprise and disbelief. "That's the god of our Sakura country. That's the Snow Woman." "Hashimoto Kanzuki, did you see that? Not only China has gods, but we have gods in our Sakura country too." Koizumi Rikuro's voice was filled with excitement and boasting. Hashimoto Kanzuki regained his composure. "Prime Minister, what do you want to talk to me about?" A late-night call meant something. Koizumi Rikuro's voice returned to calm. "Hashimoto, I believe you still remember the farce a few months ago when the United States mistook Erlang Shen's sky-howling dog for the heavenly wolf god. Although this god is undoubtedly a native god of our Sakura country, to be on the safe side, it is better to communicate with her. The most suitable candidate I can think of is you. Indeed, the most authoritative person in theological research at present is Lin Feng, and Sakura country has no professionals in this field, so the only person to consider is Hashimoto Huanayu, who has the most frequent contact with Lin Feng." Hashimoto Keijetsu pondered for a moment and then said, "Prime Minister, let's split up. I don't have much else to do in the mission, so I'll be leaving for Sakura country tomorrow. You should immediately draft the relevant documents and invite Professor Lin Feng to Sakura country to participate in the research on the gods. Prime Minister, don't exclude Professor Lin Feng's participation. He's the most professional and the only person in the world currently connected to the gods. He can help us avoid many detours." After careful consideration, it was most likely that the image of the Snow Woman would favor Sakura country, making Lin Feng's assistance a reasonable option. Koizumi Rikuro quickly weighed the pros and cons and nodded in agreement. "Okay, Hashimoto, then, get some rest. I'll convene a cabinet meeting early tomorrow morning." Hashimoto Keijetsu hung up the phone and smiled with satisfaction. She was the Snow Woman. Her appearance not only inspired the people of Sakura country to believe in the gods of Sakura country, but also subtly inspired other countries to admire their own gods. The points she earned for portraying the gods reached a massive 3 million in one fell swoop. The next day, the Sakura government sent an invitation to China, inviting Professor Lin Feng to participate in research on the gods. While news of the Snow Woman's appearance in Sakura shocked the world, with major news outlets scrambling to report on the incident, stark, without Friday's assistance, remained completely unaware of the outside world. Professor Lin Feng, we've confirmed that Friday was last seen near Rose Hill, Tennessee. Before the network went offline, Natasha informed Lin Feng of Stark's whereabouts through her headset and asked you if he needed any support. Lin Feng glanced at the 6 people around him, a little helpless. I understand. There should be people living near Rose Hill. As long as Stark charges, he should be fine. By the way, how is Pepper feeling now? Natasha sighed. It's not good. She looks calm on the surface, but she's actually trying hard to suppress her worries. I'm worried that if this continues, she'll have a mental breakdown. The more she suppresses herself now, the more severe the relapse will be. Lin Feng smiled bitterly. Women understand women best. Natasha, tell her Stark's whereabouts. That will give her peace of mind. Natasha agreed and was silent for a moment. Professor, did you see the news this morning? Lin Feng smiled. Are you talking about the news about the appearance of a god in Sakura country? I have. I'm accepting the invitation from the Sakura government and preparing to book a flight. Many scientists from around the world should be going there, but to be honest, they may not produce much research, and my gains may also be limited. However, this is not a big problem for me. Natasha, thank you for your concern. Take good care of Pepper. Professor Lin Feng hung up the phone. Natasha breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that Lin Feng hadn't been affected by the negative emotions. She also understood his other intentions. Every previous conversation had at some point touched upon the Kree investigation, but since the agreement took effect, this was the first time Lin Feng had spoken to her without mentioning the Kree, considered a top priority. This suggested the presence of Kree members within his monitoring team. Natasha worked on her computer, investigating the identities of the 6-member team. Pop-up ads with titles like shocking. A god appeared over Sakura country. Will the god fever sweep the world again? Appeared on her computer, but Natasha was too busy to respond, constantly scaling the firewalls, navigating through the CIA and MI6 firewalls. Mr. Stark, do you think that after the appearance of the Sakura country god, will God appear in America as well? The young boy, glued to the television, watched reporters vying for coverage of the Sakura country god's news, curiously asked Stark. Stark shook his head and stroked the boy's head. Harry, it's not that simple. Both China and Sakura land have records of their gods dating back to before the Common Era, such as China's classic of mountains and seas and Sakura land's Kojiki. This proves that gods existed long before Christ, just concentrated in East Asia. And God only began to be portrayed in so many ways after the founding of the Church by Jesus Christ in the 1st century AD. Our God cannot withstand the test of time or the scrutiny of events. In short, it's unlikely that other gods will appear in the future. Harry was a little disappointed, but soon became excited again. Well, Stark, you're a member of the Avengers, so you must see gods often, right? Stark shook his head. Not really. I haven't had many close encounters with gods. But I have Professor Lin Feng, who knows a lot about gods. I could introduce you to them someday. Really? Harry's eyes gleamed with excitement. Meeting Professor Lin Feng was his dream. Yesterday, after dragging his mech for a long time, Stark came across a warehouse. Seeing the dilapidated warehouse, he assumed it was deserted and took possession of it. The situation was urgent, and he was practically freezing to death, too concerned to worry about infringing on someone else's right to peace. Fortunately, when he opened the warehouse door, he found it empty. Stark dragged the mech into place, turned on the lights, and began repairing the damaged parts from the fall, while searching for a place to recharge. Then he saw Harry, holding up a simple potato gun. The gun looked fancy, but its power was so impressive that even Stark was surprised. All right, I surrender, Stark said, raising his hands to signal his intentions. Harry lowered his gun. I know you, Mr. Stark. My name is Harry. I'm a fan. Recalling last night's events, Stark said to Harry, Harry, I'll do my best to get you to see Professor Lin Feng, but don't take anything for granted. You still have to be self-reliant. Harry didn't understand Stark's sudden seriousness, but he could sense his concern and care for him. Don't worry, Mr. Stark. I'll keep it in mind. Stark picked up the newspaper. Compared to the explosive news about the reappearance of a god in Sakura country, another piece of news seemed less eye-catching, but to him, it was particularly glaring. Tony Stark was killed in yesterday's terrorist attack. He knew it was a provocation and boasting by the mastermind, Mandarin, and he was determined to avenge his past. The next morning, without disturbing Harry's sleep, Stark quietly infiltrated the hideout of the actor who had disguised himself as Mandarin. This was likely his base of communication with the mastermind, perhaps uncovering any clues he had missed. After revealing Stark's whereabouts to Pepper, Natasha softly asked, "Pepper, are you planning to go look for him? Or do you have other plans?" Pepper's gaze was no longer lost. Relieved at the knowledge of Stark's whereabouts, she said firmly, "No need. I'll wait here for him. I believe he'll come back for me, just as he believes I'll always be waiting." Natasha was speechless, looking at Pepper's determination. Perhaps this was the power of love, the willingness to wait blindly for someone, the faith to stay together. She couldn't help but feel a surge of envy. "Miss Pepper, your guests have arrived," the front desk clerk reminded Pepper, reminding her not to forget her work schedule. Despite Stark's disappearance, his clean energy business continued to operate smoothly under Pepper's calm leadership. Natasha smiled, "You still have official business to attend to, so I won't bother you." With that, she turned and left. Once alone, Natasha's expression took a sharp turn, and she decided to thoroughly investigate the medical expert. Of the 6 people monitoring Lin Feng, he was the only American, the most likely Kree in disguise, and the closest to him. Pepper watched Natasha's retreating figure and smiled wryly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 73 Star Exploration Number 1 has lost contact. Chapter 73 Star Exploration Number 1 has lost contact. 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 73 Star Exploration Number 1 has lost contact. However, Professor Lin must be watching the live broadcast now, Zhao Songyang said again. Yes, Feng Min nodded. Now the whole country, and even the whole world, are paying attention to this matter. Moreover, this matter was promoted by Professor Lin. If there is anyone who hopes to find traces of the ancient continent on the moon, it must be Professor Lin, so no matter where he is, he must be watching the live broadcast. They don't know that Lin Feng is now in the famous mountain and river of the moon. Lin Feng has already made the layout, and the next step is to wait for Star Exploration Number 1 to land on the moon. He also saw and heard the excitement on Earth. A smile appeared on his face. It will take 2.5 days for Star Exploration Number 1 to land on the moon. It will probably land on the moon at 2:15 p.m. on the 3rd day, 2 days later. Because, if there are really traces of the ancient continent on the moon, then it must be on the back of the moon. If it were on the front side, the side facing Earth, it would have been observed by the government long ago. However, it would take Star Exploration 1 quite some time to circle the far side of the moon and land on it along its planned trajectory. The audience kept following the live broadcast. Time slipped by. Soon, 2 days had passed. Star Exploration 1 had entered the far side of the moon and was within its planned orbit, about to touch down at its landing point. This was also the most dangerous and crucial juncture, prone to uncontrollable factors. At the Quanjiu Satellite Launch Command Center, dozens of technicians were busy. Computers beeped continuously, and various data points were constantly changing, recording the status of Star Exploration 1. The orbit is normal, no deviation, the lunar periphery is normal, no meteorites or obstacles have been detected, all data from Star Exploration 1 is normal, the 4 astronauts' vital signs are normal. Each team of technicians reported the relevant data. Chief Engineer Zhang Mingyang listened to the data reports, his face tense as he stared at the large screen. The screen displayed the real-time footage captured by Star Exploration 1. The moon was just ahead, seemingly within reach. Yet, this was the most dangerous time. Despite hundreds of successful landing simulations, no one could be certain of what would happen in the real world. It was like Schrodinger's cat. But Zhang Mingyang felt a slight sense of relief when he heard all the data was normal. He said into the microphone, "Zhou Hao, how are you feeling?" A second or two passed before the astronaut's voice came through. "Everything's fine, that's good," Zhang Mingyang said. "It's 2:03 p.m. now. In 12 minutes, Star Exploration 1 will touch down. Be prepared." Another second or two passed before the astronaut's voice came through, "Roger that." The audience in the live stream watched this as well. They were all excited to see the landing on the far side of the moon. Ha ha ha, is it finally landing? It's been such a long wait. Holy crap, we can already see the moon. Ha ha ha, isn't it time to explore? Hurry up. I can't wait. I can't imagine how excited I'd be if we actually found traces of the ancient continent on the moon. Ha ha ha, the comments were boisterous. The audience was eagerly anticipating lunar exploration. Meanwhile, in the United States, at SHIELD, Nick was watching a live broadcast. China's Star Exploration 1 was about to land on the far side of the moon. This was the most vulnerable time for accidents. Pierce hurried in and asked, "Nick, what's going on? Landing in about 10 minutes, so soon?" Pierce was a little surprised and also came to the computer to look at the screen. After a few seconds, he was still confused. Do you think China doesn't know about the moon, or do they have some evidence? Otherwise, why are they so obsessed with exploring the moon? Pierce still couldn't understand. Nick shook his head and didn't answer. He'd previously learned from NASA that there was no way any trace of the great continent existed on the moon. He'd initially believed that. But now that China was about to land on the moon, he felt a strange wavering feeling, wondering if China might actually discover something on the far side. After all, images taken by machines were far less accurate and authentic than those taken by humans. Pierce added, "But I just heard from NASA that they're ready. If China successfully lands on the moon and indeed discovers traces of the great continent, they'll immediately launch a manned lunar mission and conduct similar exploration and excavation. In short, they can't lag behind China." "Yes, that's perfect," Nick nodded. That way, his worries were over. 10 minutes passed quickly, and the Star Exploration 1 was preparing to land. Control Center, can you hear me? This is Star Exploration 1 astronaut Joe Howe. Star Exploration 1 has entered landing orbit, requesting landing. Landing approved. Be safe, Chief Engineer Zheng Mingyang replied. Roger. Landing, boom boom boom, a tremendous roar echoed. On the big screen, only half of the Star Exploration 1's rocket remained intact, still belching high-intensity flames. The large, aircraft-like structure on the right remained intact. The astronauts sat there. Boom boom boom, Star Exploration 1 was constantly adjusting its angle. The technicians kept reporting back. Drop landing trajectory, please continue adjusting. Drop landing trajectory, please continue adjusting. Everyone in the command center felt their hearts clench at the news. Fortunately, the fifth beep brought good news. Entered landing trajectory, calculated data is normal, please maintain. Star Exploration 1 adjusted its landing trajectory to face downwards and slowly descended. Everyone in the command center was stunned by this. Then, they erupted in joy. Great! Success! As long as we land according to this plan, there should be no problem. We'll be able to land on the moon and explore it soon. Ha ha ha! We're all witnesses of this era. The command center was filled with excitement. Hearing the excited voices, Zheng Mingyang also smiled, feeling more relaxed. Now that they had entered the landing orbit, there shouldn't be any more accidents. He said into the microphone again, "Joe Howe, how are you guys feeling?" "Everything is fine." After a second or two, Joe Howe's voice came out. Zheng Mingyang heard this and was about to say, "That's good," but suddenly, a strong electromagnetic sound was heard. Zzz. Hearing this sound, Zheng Mingyang's face changed. Then, with a bang, the image of Star Exploration number 1 on the big screen disappeared. And the screen went black. Zheng Mingyang's scalp instantly tingled. 225. Chapter 224, An Existence on Par with Gods. 225. Chapter 224 Existence on Par with Gods 2024-11-04 Author, Good Monster Chapter 224 Existence on Par with Gods Indeed, Natasha can't help with the operation of the company, and she now needs to deal with something that is both troublesome and necessary. She slowly went downstairs, while tidying up her manners, and recalling the details of the operation. The guest who made an appointment this time was Lucaso. He had a good impression of Little Pepper before and invited her on a date many times, but she refused. This time he came to exchange ideas on the project, and hoped that he could handle it in a businesslike manner. Little Pepper pushed open the door of the reception room, and saw a man in a suit and tie, with an elegant demeanor, walking towards her. He was completely different from the humble, sloppy, and thin Lucaso in her impression. They were like two different people. Pepper was surprised, but politely confirmed, "Lucaso." Lucaso smiled confidently. "It's me, Pepper. Then, he looked her over. You look really good lately. This outfit suits you very well. It's beautiful. Pepper, still in shock, said, Oh my god, you look so handsome. I can't believe you. She struggled to find the right words, so she simply asked, What have you been doing these past few years? Lucaso smiled confidently. Nothing serious. Just a minor health issue. I've been receiving treatment for the past 5 years. Also, from now on, you can call me Sean Lucaso. Pepper gradually recovered from her shock. Whoever this person was, he was a guest for today's business negotiations and an old acquaintance. She poured Lucaso a glass of water. Nice to meet you, Lucaso. Pepper's words had returned to calm, but she didn't express much surprise. This made Lucaso frown. He realized that after all these years, he hadn't held a place in Pepper's heart. He envied Stark and hated him even more. Stark was a child of destiny, radiant and brilliant. Everyone could only see his brilliance, but not the shadow beneath it. Luxor was that shadow, the humblest, darkest part. In a corner, hidden from view, he yearned for attention. He was also a brilliant man, unique in his biological research and a leader in materials physics. But his intelligence didn't bring him much confidence. Instead, his frail health and frequent bullying led him to constantly doubt his abilities. He grew increasingly insecure and took to glasses to shield himself from the world's gaze. But at the same time, he also blocked himself from the world. He lived in his own comfort zone until he discovered Stark. His thirst for light led him to hope to meet Stark, but he received no response. So, he transformed. He removed his glasses and reconnected with the world. He became obsessed with researching the ultimate biomodification technology. In this field, he discovered he could share Stark's confidence, poise, charm, and brilliance. So, why wouldn't he become just like Stark? He looked at Pepper, his smile brimming with confidence. Pepper, let me tell you about our company's latest project. For years, my research team, our think tank, and I have been cleverly circumventing the unethical biological research ban, Luke Sasso said, emphasizing it by making quotation marks with his hands. He smiled broadly and spoke eloquently. But then, by chance, we developed a little gadget. Luke Sasso pulled a small box from his pocket and noticed Pepper staring at it intently. He chuckled softly, gently touching his ear to make sure the device he was wearing was functioning properly, then attached a small device to the back of his ear. We call it the ultimate modification, he said, glancing at the box unconsciously. Pepper felt a surge of unease. Luxus exuded a newfound confidence that was admirable and quite attractive to women, but it also revealed a strong possessiveness and control, and even a subtle desire for destruction could be detected in his words. Luxus, too, sensed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. After Stark's disappearance, he immediately had the newspapers publish the news of his death. Although this news was overshadowed by reports of a god appearing in Sakura country, he knew that those who cared about Stark would definitely notice it, especially Pepper Potts. However, Pepper Potts remained remarkably calm upon hearing the news, showing no sign of panic or concern. Could this mean that she already knew Stark's whereabouts? Recalling the incident of the fake Mandarin being captured by War Machine some time ago, Luxus suspected that Stark, with his intelligence, might find clues in the fake Mandarin's residence. He remained calm on the surface, but he was already making a subtle gesture. Luxus picked up the remote control, which controlled the lights in the reception room. If you don't mind, I'd like to turn off the lights. The reception room was surrounded by transparent glass, allowing for the flow of people without worrying about accidents. Luke Sasso extended his hand to Pepper, a strange smile on his face. Come on, Pepper, join me as we explore the mysteries of the human brain. He then pulled 3 steel balls from his pocket and rolled them onto the table. The balls instantly assumed a fixed position, stabilizing themselves to project a vast, boundless image of the universe. Before Pepper could react, Luke Sasso awkwardly called out, Wait, sorry, I made a mistake. This is a picture of the universe. Luke Sasso adjusted the remote control, confirming the sequence. Yes, that's it. The dazzling cosmic image vanished, replaced by a blue projection of a neural network. It was mysterious and beautiful, captivating the eye, tinged with an unknown hue that held the gaze captivating. Pepper involuntarily stood up, her breath quickening. She was overwhelmed by the beauty. Compared to medical brain anatomy diagrams, this neural network projection was filled with an unknown beauty and allure. Lucaso proudly observed the smile on Pepper's face and asked, This is the human brain. How is it? Isn't the simulation amazing? Despite being captivated, Pepper remembered they were in an office setting. She replied, amazing. Incredible. Lucaso, how did you do that? Lucaso looked away. Thank you for the compliment, Pepper. This is a projection of my brain's neural activity. Pepper was momentarily taken aback by this answer, but then realization dawned on her. Turning to Lucaso, she asked in shock, what did you say? Looking at Pepper, who seemed somewhat puzzled, Lucaso boasted, what you're seeing is actually a real-time projection of my brain's neural activity. He pointed behind his ear, inviting Pepper to pay attention. Come on, I'll show you up close. He then stepped onto the table in the reception room and extended his hand, inviting Pepper to explore this new world with him. Pepper also stepped onto the table. Lucas held out his arm. Now pinch my arm hard, seeing Pepper's hesitation. Lucas smiled and said, don't hesitate, Pepper. I'm not afraid of pain. Hurry up. If you don't, I can't show you. Pepper had no choice but to gently pinch Lucaso's arm. The projected image immediately glowed with a yellowish light, surrounding them. Pepper was startled by the sudden yellow light. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, she asked, oh my god, what is that? Lucaso replied, that's the primary sensory cortex, the brain's pain center. You pinched me just now, and my brain immediately received the feedback and projected it. This is just to demonstrate the effect of real-time feedback, he patiently explained to Pepper. Then, he picked up the remote and brought up another image. But that's not the point. What I really want to show you is this. Lucaso walked behind Pepper, trying to whisper in her ear, but Pepper calmly avoided him. We are currently working to unlock the boundless potential of human bioelectricity, Lucaso said in a deep, captivating voice. He gestured repeatedly on the projection of the brain's neural network, searching for his target. Pepper's resistance irritated him, but he remained undeterred, convinced that Pepper must have already pinpointed Stark's whereabouts. Once we successfully unlock the potential of human bioelectricity, we can transmit it here. Lucaso finally locked onto his target and zoomed in. There's plenty of space here. This means the human brain and DNA system are about to undergo a revolutionary upgrade. This is a historical necessity, unstoppable. He gazed at Pepper, his eyes focused and affectionate. However, Pepper simply gazed at the crucial point with curiosity, then gasped in wonder. After the presentation, Lucaso and Pepper sat down again, ready for their face-to-face conversation. However, Lucaso, who was supposed to be in the guest seat, had unwittingly taken the lead. He enthusiastically demonstrated his research findings to Pepper. Imagine if any living thing were a living biological computer, and you could hack into its systems and reprogram its DNA at any time and from anywhere. Here, Lucaso paused deliberately, giving Pepper ample room for imagination. Lucaso was confident in his plan and believed Pepper would embrace it. The emergence of gods had shattered people's preconceived notions. Compared to the previous world governed by the laws of physics, more and more people were devoting themselves to biological research, seeking to uncover the secrets of human evolution. In Chinese legend, there are many individuals who wielded divine powers in mortal form, such as Fuxi, the human emperor, and the Yan and Wukong emperors. These individuals stood shoulder to shoulder with the gods, powerful and mysterious. Furthermore, the gods explicitly stated that they would not interfere in the human world, a far superior stance to the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible destroyed the Tower of Babel to disrupt human unity and unleashed a flood to punish those who disobeyed his will. True gods will not interfere with human beings in any way, just as the famous Chinese saying goes, heaven and earth are not benevolent, they treat all things as straw dogs. Sages are not benevolent, they treat the people as straw dogs, they treat everything like a sacrifice made of straw, without excessive interference, without being biased, without arbitrarily attacking or destroying, and certainly not forcing human beings to believe in them. Pepper regained her calmness and rationality as a businesswoman. I have to say, this is indeed an amazing plan. A smile appeared on Lucaso's face, but was immediately poured a bucket of cold water by Pepper. But Lucaso, this technology is very likely to be used in biological weapons, such as biochemical warriors, super mercenaries, etc. Stark Enterprises is now just a clean energy company. Lucaso was a little unhappy when he heard this. His smile became stiff, and then his expression became elusive. Stark, actually I once invited him to join our company. That was in 1999 when we were still in Switzerland. But he rejected me. But the situation is different now. Even without him, I can run the company in an orderly manner. The same is true for your Stark Clean Energy Company. There is another genius at the helm. She is not like Stark," he pointed at Pepper. "She is not under Stark's jurisdiction, nor does she have his genius arrogance. The implication is that Pepper can actually make the decision on this matter herself." Pepper said seriously, "Jean-Luc Sasso, while I'm very interested in this economic cooperation project, I can't help you with this. The potential for your technology to be used in military applications is too great, and there's currently no effective means of suppressing it. I'm sorry, but I can't help you." "I must refuse." Pepper personally escorted Luke Sasso out of Stark Enterprises. Although somewhat disappointed, Luke Sasso remained cheerful, saying to Pepper, "Well, I'm a little disappointed. But as my father said, only through the fog of failure can we see the dawn of success." Pepper frowned, puzzled, and said, "That's a bit profound." "I don't quite understand what you mean." Luke Sasso smiled and said, "I don't quite understand either. Maybe my father is a philosopher." Pepper suddenly laughed. She had to admit, Luke Sasso's humor and optimism were truly admirable. Luke Sasso looked at Pepper and said, "Pepper, we'll meet again. After all, only through the fog of failure can we see the dawn of success." Pepper watched Luke Sasso's retreating figure, her heart filled with confusion and bewilderment. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, she wondered if Stark's whereabouts were connected to Luke Sasso. She quickly shook her head, as she had no idea whether Luke Sasso and Stark had any grudges against each other, and such malicious speculation was unkind. Furthermore, with decrying the Avengers, she shouldn't have such thoughts about Luke Sasso. After shaking her head, Pepper returned to the company. Lin Feng's research on the gods was unparalleled worldwide, so Koizumi Rikuro's hospitality clearly had ulterior motives. Chapter 75 Global Sensation. Chapter 75, Global Sensation, 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 75, Global Sensation. What the hell is going on? Zhang Mingyang was shocked, his mind froze. This scene was so sudden and so out of the ordinary. The audience in the live broadcast room also gasped and looked shocked when they saw this scene. After several seconds, they came to their senses and excitedly posted comments. "Holy crap! What's going on? Incredible, this is too incredible, yeah, it's absolutely shocking, how did this white light appear? Did any one of you see it? Describe it to me." "I couldn't bear to look down, so I closed my eyes and didn't see it." "Me too." "Someone come and explain." "I saw it. The star exploration number 1 was about to crash into the moon, but suddenly a beam of white light rushed up from below and held it up at a very fast speed." Ha. It suddenly occurred to me that this situation is very similar to the methods used by Sun Wukong and Tathagata Buda. Does this mean that the moon is really a fragment of the prehistoric continent, and that there are traces of the prehistoric continent on it? Holy crap, the analysis above makes a lot of sense. Ha. It makes sense. When I think about it this way, there is a high possibility that there are traces of the prehistoric continent. Don't jump to conclusions about this kind of thing. Don't forget that there are aliens in the universe. The last time we saw Hong Kong City, we can still remember it vividly. The audience was thrilled. This proved that something truly existed on the moon, otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. However, whether it was related to the Great Desolation continent remained to be determined. After all, this was a very serious matter, potentially concerning the future of all humanity, so it was too early to draw conclusions. Unbeknownst to them, the white light had been sent by Lin Feng to save the Starry Sky Exploration 1. Otherwise, Starry Sky Exploration 1 would have crashed directly into the lunar surface. Wukong University. Zhao Songyang and Fang Min watched in disbelief. They had thought Starry Sky Exploration 1 was about to crash into the moon. They hadn't expected such a sudden event. Hiss! Zhao Songyang came to his senses, took a breath, and exclaimed in surprise, "What's going on?" "I don't know," Fang Min asked, puzzled. Suddenly, a thought struck him, and he exclaimed in surprise, "But, for this to happen, it means there's definitely something on the moon, otherwise, it wouldn't be like this. I think it's very likely related to the Great Desolation continent." Zhao Songyang was startled by this, and it made sense. Fang Min added, "However, nothing has been discovered yet. Perhaps it's something else." "Yes, you're right," Zhao Songyang nodded. He also understood that this matter was of grave importance and that no conclusion could be drawn based on the current situation. The foreign leaders were all stunned. unable to believe the miraculous scene before their eyes. Great Ying Nation, what is going on? Sakura Nation, oh my god, this is unbelievable. Russia, oh my god, what am I seeing? The United States. Gwangju Satellite Launch Center. On the large screen, the Star Exploration 1 was supported by a soft white light. Zheng Mingyan came to his senses, took a breath, and exclaimed in shock, "What the hell is going on?" Zheng Mingyan had just given up, believing the plan had failed. But he had never expected this. At this moment, before he could even think, the technicians' excited voices came over. Report. The lunar magnetic storm has passed, and the Surface Control Center has re-established contact with the Star Exploration 1. Everyone present was stunned by these words. Immediately, cheers erupted. Yes. That's great, it's okay. It's okay. This is truly great, ha ha ha, after all the darkness comes a new light. I finally understand the meaning of that poem, don't get too excited just yet. I wonder if we can correct the landing angle of Star Exploration 1. Yes, that's right. Upon hearing this, Zheng Mingyan didn't hesitate and immediately called to the technicians, quick, try to control Star Exploration 1 to correct the landing angle. Yes, the technicians, excited and nervous, began to try. Now that contact with Star Exploration 1 had been re-established, remote control was possible. Zheng Mingyan then spoke into the microphone, Star Exploration 1, can you hear me? If you can, please answer. After a second or two, a clear voice, free of electromagnetic interference, came through. Star Exploration 1 receiving this. Surface Command Center, the lunar magnetic storm has passed, and all equipment is functioning normally. Hearing this, Zheng Mingyan breathed a sigh of relief. He added, Zhou Hao, Surface Control is correcting the landing angle of Star Exploration 1. Please stay in touch, roger that. Then, on screen, a small energy flame erupted from the left side of Star Exploration 1. Driven by the flame, the tilted spacecraft gradually straightened. Once fully upright, the flame vanished. Everyone rejoiced at the successful correction. But then, the soft white light instantly vanished, as if it had never appeared. Without the support of the white light, Star Exploration 1 slowly descended. Everyone was immediately surprised. What was this white light? Why did it feel like it was purposely saving Star Exploration 1? It appeared when danger arose and disappeared again when the danger was over? Everyone was puzzled. Boom boom boom, boom. At that moment, Star Exploration 1 landed smoothly on the moon. Everyone held their breath, worried about an unexpected incident. But after a few seconds, nothing happened. Star Exploration 1 remained stable. Everyone was excited. Yes. Success. Ho ha ho ha. A successful manned lunar landing. China did it. Great. We can explore the moon. Ha ha ha. Regardless of whether there are traces of the great continent on the moon, this time our actions will go down in history books. The audience in the live broadcast room cheered upon seeing this. Ha ha ha. Great. A successful lunar landing. Awesome. So awesome. We're finally getting to explore the moon. Holy crap, is the main film about to start? Ha ha ha. The foreign leaders were all stunned by this. They had previously believed that China would never be able to land on the far side of the moon, but reality slapped them in the face. China had successfully and safely landed. This was a monumental achievement. Excluding the possibility of finding traces of the great continent on the moon, the fact that China had landed a man on the far side of the moon was a huge accomplishment, putting them significantly ahead of the rest of the world. Great Ying Nation, damn it. Watching China successfully land on the moon is more painful than me not being able to land on the moon at all. Sakura Nation, fake. Could this be fake? Is this a computer-generated image from China? The truth is, just now, during a lunar magnetic storm, China's manned rocket crashed on the lunar surface. America! Exclamation mark. Quick, contact NASA headquarters, South Korea. Great. China, get exploring. I've prepared all the materials for the World Heritage application. Gwangju Satellite Launch Command Center. Zheng Mingyan was thrilled by the smooth landing. He asked into the microphone, Zhou Hao, how are you feeling? After a second or two, Zhou Hao's response came. Everything is fine, that's good. From now on, you have 15 minutes to organize and check the equipment bay. After 15 minutes, if there are no problems, you will open the hatch and set foot on the moon to explore. Any problems? No problems, Zhou Hao's firm voice came a second or two later. 226. Chapter 225 The Sakura God Messenger was born? 226. Chapter 225 Has the Sakura Divine Messenger been born? 2024-11-05 Author, Good Monster Chapter 225 Has the Sakura Divine Messenger been born? Lin Feng arrived in Tokyo, the capital, aboard a special plane provided by the Sakura Nation, and received a lavish reception from Prime Minister Koizumi Rikuro. Lin Feng knew the truth, but even so, he remained strictly business as usual, not giving Koizumi Rikuro much of a warm welcome. Koizumi Rikuro, needing a favor from Lin Feng, could only console himself by saying that Lin Feng was being business as usual. The news of the Sakura Nation's divine appearance shocked scientific research teams worldwide. Learning from their previous experience, they only sent representatives to inform the Sakura government and observed Lin Feng's reaction. The previous time the immortal island appeared, they had misunderstood and made a fool of themselves. It turned out the divine being had been waiting for Lin Feng. With the divine being's reappearance this time, everyone became cautious, primarily observing Lin Feng's reaction. At this moment, Lin Feng was surrounded by various media outlets, being interviewed. The Sakura Nation reporters were particularly active. Professor Lin Feng, you are the only expert in the field of deity research. What are your thoughts on the appearance of the Sakura Kingdom's deities this time? Lin Feng was interviewed and responded in English, I'm sorry, but my knowledge is limited. I don't know much about the Sakura Kingdom's deities, so I can't jump to conclusions. For now, we can only wait for the deities to reappear. The image of this deity is highly similar to the Snow Woman in the ancient mythology of the Sakura Kingdom, so it can be preliminarily considered to be the Snow Woman. That's all, everyone. I need to rest. Professor Lin Feng. Professor Lin Feng. After Lin Feng left, surrounded by a crowd of people, the reporters still pursued him, but they were unable to break through the security line and could only watch Lin Feng disappear. Professor Lin Feng, I didn't expect you to be so popular among the people of Sakura Kingdom, Ra said nearby. Lin Feng snorted coldly, not necessarily. I simply met a certain expectation in their hearts. The image of the gods is no longer exclusive to China, and I am a leading figure in the field of divine research, so their attitude towards me is full of contradictions. They want me to recognize and study the gods of Sakura country, but they also don't want me to deny the existence of gods. Mr. Ross, you may not see this as clearly as I do. After listening, Ross asked, then Professor Lin Feng, what is your attitude towards the gods of Sakura country? Lin Feng looked up at the sky. It's the same old saying, know what you know, and don't know what you don't know. I know nothing about the gods of Sakura country and have never encountered them, so it's hard to draw a conclusion. My suggestion is to wait for the gods to descend again. The last time the Chinese fairy island appeared, the gods chose me. This time, when the gods of Sakura country appear, there may also be a place where the gods live together and a spokesperson is selected. Of course, this is just speculation, and the specifics will need to be discussed later. Koizumi Rikuro arranged lodging for Lin Feng and his group at a chain of hotels run by Chinese businessmen in Sakura country. Lin Feng could not help but admire Koizumi Rikuro's impeccable approach to preserving appearances, which was practically impeccable. However, the current focus was on building a shared future for mankind, and Lin Feng no longer cared about Koizumi Rikuro's petty tricks. His gaze was already fixed on the worlds beyond Blue Star, where the ego were devouring other planets. A warship patrolled the waters of Sakura country. An officer yawned, oblivious to Hashimoto Kanzuki floating outside the nearby window. Professor Lin Feng is right. The arrival of a god requires signs and a sense of mystery. Well, then, it's up to you, Hashimoto Kanzuki said, gazing at the patrol ship, her mind made up. Lin Feng's advice was simple. First, have a god appear, then show the god's gathering place, and finally, choose Hashimoto Kanzuki as the god's messenger. With precedent, this approach would be more widely accepted. Hashimoto Kanzuki then vanished. On the Sakura Nation warship, soldiers cried out in surprise, "Captain, look!" The captain glanced quickly, noticing a thick fog had appeared outside the window. He frantically responded, "Quick, call headquarters." "Contact them, Captain. We've already contacted headquarters, and our footage has been sent over," the soldier reported. "Look, what's that?" another soldier shouted. Following his gaze, a massive gate pillar suddenly appeared before them, a torii gate, a symbol of Sakura culture. Reminiscent of the islands hidden behind the thick fog in China, the officer rejoiced. Looks like that's where the gods of our Sakura nation reside. Soldiers, charge. Let's see if we can get in. Unsurprisingly, however, they were turned away. That afternoon, the press erupted in fury again. Was the appearance of the Tathagata gate another sign of the gods' attitude? Reporters had already arrived at Lin Feng's hotel, and even more were fixated on the Tathagata gate appearing on the Sakura nation's waters. Under the gaze of the crowd, Lin Feng stretched lazily before the reporters. Professor Lin Feng, the gods have appeared again. What are your thoughts on this, Professor Lin Feng, regarding the appearance of the gods from the Sakura kingdom? Do you think this will have an impact on the belief system of the Chinese gods? Professor Lin Feng, your research in the field of theology is universally recognized. Are you interested in establishing new disciplines, such as specialized branches of theology? Faced with a reporter's chaotic questions, Lin Feng smiled, but his impatience was already evident. He waved his hand. Please be patient, everyone. Ask your questions one by one. The reporters quieted down. Lin Feng looked around and called on each of them. Reporter, you go first. This reporter from the Sakura kingdom asked. Professor Lin Feng, regarding the gods appearing again this time, and not being Chinese gods, what are your thoughts? After listening to the translation, Lin Feng chuckled. My opinion doesn't matter. Gods are gods at all times. My opinion can neither influence nor change anything. Of course, from my personal perspective, whether it's the gods of the Sakura kingdom or the gods of China, as long as they don't interfere in human affairs, that's all that's best. Another reporter then asked, Professor Lin Feng, do you think the appearance of the Sakura land deity will have an impact on the diplomatic relationship between Sakura land and China? Lin Feng pondered for a moment. There will definitely be an impact, but it's not absolute. The power of the deity is undoubtedly strong enough to influence political dynamics. But ultimately, it's people-to-people exchanges and the attitudes of the government that truly determine the relationship between the two countries. Professor Lin Feng, do you think deities from other cultural systems will also appear? A Western reporter asked provocatively. Lin Feng pondered for a moment. No one can predict the future. Who knows? We'll see when that day finally arrives. Just as Lin Feng was answering the reporter's question, a message from Hashimoto Keijetsu appeared on the Tathagata gate in the waters of Sakura land. The Sakura land authorities, closely monitoring the Tathagata gate, immediately reported the information to Prime Minister Koizumi Rikuro. After hearing the report, Koizumi Rikuro immediately instructed, quick, find Hashimoto immediately. Quick. Also, have researchers from all countries gather in front of the Tathagata gate. It had become a tacit understanding that every major discovery would attract researchers from around the world. The same thing happened with the appearance of the Huaxia Fairy Island the other day, a situation tacitly accepted by all governments. Lin Feng and his companions had already arrived by boat at the Tathagata gate. Gazing at the towering gate, it was a moving sight. As the sky darkened, the gate shone with a dazzling light, causing everyone to close their eyes. When they reopened their eyes, a massive circle had appeared near the gate. Lin Feng, wearing sunglasses, his hands in his pockets, instructed everyone to remain outside the circle. Professor Lin Feng, is there a reason for this? Chen Haitian asked, somewhat puzzled. Lin Feng smiled. The gods themselves have their own rules for their territory. This circle is actually a demarcation of the divine realm. It was the same the last time I ascended the fairy island. No one else could ascend because within the divine realm, unauthorized individuals were forbidden to enter. This time, the gods have specifically marked out this circle to demonstrate their territorial sovereignty and to warn everyone that anyone who dares to offend their majesty will suffer the consequences. Lin Feng's words hushed everyone, no one wanting to cross the circle and experience the divine wrath. Look, it's Miss Hashimoto. Miss Hashimoto has appeared. A researcher from the Sakura country shouted excitedly when he saw Hashimoto Kanayu appear. Everyone's eyes shifted over. Because it was a summons from the gods, Hashimoto Kanayu rushed over without stopping. Although it was just one of her clones, she was not as lazy as Lin Feng, and she was quite rigorous and serious in her work. Hashimoto Kanayu, with light makeup, was wearing a formal dress. Under the faint moonlight, she had a beautiful face and a well-proportioned figure, like a fairy walking out of a painting. Even Lin Feng couldn't help but look at her a few more times. It must be said that Hashimoto Kanayu has always been a very charming woman, but he had never thought about it in this way, and he had always ignored her charm. Hashimoto Kanayu walked towards Lin Feng in high heels. Numerous media outlets were watching with awe, and even researchers from the Sakura nation were jealous. Why would Miss Hashimoto go there? She's only going to see our Sakura nation's gods. Why would she go to see Lin Feng? Hashimoto Kanayu, ignoring the crowd's comments, approached Lin Feng, appearing somewhat nervous. Professor Lin Feng, the gods are calling me. What should I do? Her action seemed normal to everyone. After all, Lin Feng was the only one who had ever come into contact with the gods, and she was simply asking for advice from her senior. Lin Feng pondered for a moment. Perhaps she's waiting for the gods to guide her. Don't worry, the gods have no ill will towards us. Just be patient and wait. As soon as he finished speaking, petals began to rain down in front of the Tathagata gate. Amidst the rain, a path stretched across the sea, extending towards Hashimoto Kanayu. Lin Feng smiled. Miss Hashimoto, your gods are here to greet you. Go ahead. Hashimoto Kanayu nodded earnestly and set foot on the path. The rain of cherry blossoms fell on people's shoulders, and they could only smell the fragrance of the blossoms, but the petals never landed on them. Only Hashimoto Kanayu, bathed in a shower of cherry blossoms, her body stained with petals, advanced towards the unknown Tathagata gate. Under the gaze of the crowd, she finally stepped through the gate. Lin Feng, looking at the numerous news media, said, "Today, before the eyes of the entire world, the divine messenger of the Sakura kingdom has been born. She is Hashimoto Kanayu." Most of the crowd ignored Lin Feng, their gaze fixed on Hashimoto Kanayu, eagerly anticipating her return. Only Chen Haitian stopped him. "Professor Lin Feng, aren't you being superfluous?" Ever since Lin Feng returned from his last visit to the fairy island, he had become the spokesperson for the gods. Hashimoto Kanayu had stepped through the Tathagata gate this time, and if nothing unexpected happened, she would also assume the role of spokesperson for the gods when she returned to the human world. Lin Feng smiled faintly and patted Chen Haitian on the shoulder. "Haitian, I didn't mean that." Chen Haitian was stunned for a moment, then a look of joy crossed his face. "You're saying that our gods are fully aware of this matter but have chosen not to interfere, correct?" Lin Feng nodded. "Please find time to discuss this with the higher-ups. The gods of Sakura country may intersect with the gods of China in the future. The exact nature of their connection is unclear at this point, but what is certain is that there will be no conflict between the two sides, and their basic attitude is towards peace talks." Chen Haitian immediately conveyed Lin Feng's intentions to the higher-ups. This was undoubtedly good news for the Chinese government. Inside the Tathagata, Hashimoto Kanzuki, dressed in a white kimono, approached Lin Feng. Seeing that she was still dressed as a snow maiden, Lin Feng asked, "Why, do you like this outfit?" Hashimoto Kanayu lowered her head shyly. "Yes, Professor Lin Feng, this outfit is beautiful. Do you mind me wearing it like this?" Lin Feng said nothing more. "No, as long as you like it. Have you thought about your next plan?" Hashimoto Kanayu's eyes were firm. "Yes, Professor Lin Feng, I have." Based on his own experience, Lin Feng told Hashimoto Kanayu that the same deity cannot appear multiple times in a short period of time, otherwise the rate of point accumulation will be greatly reduced. In addition, a portion of the points earned by Hashimoto Kanayu's deity will automatically be added to Lin Feng's. Although they are shared, Lin Feng's system is the main system, while Hashimoto Kanayu's is only a subsystem. Therefore, Lin Feng asked Hashimoto Kanayu about her next plan. Since the gods cannot appear frequently, the accumulation of points from mission play will inevitably be slow. Hashimoto Kanayu's accumulation of points will undoubtedly be more difficult than Lin Feng's. Hashimoto Kanzuki explained his plan. "Professor Lin Feng, humans worldwide are now aware of the existence of gods. Although our points will decrease when we play as gods, the total amount will increase, after all, with the added bonus of global faith. Furthermore, we can expand the image of gods, such as the Asgard realm, the Dark Star, and other life-bearing planets in the galaxy. Where there are people, there is faith, and the appearance of gods is the embodiment of faith." Lin Feng was stunned. After the last Thanos invasion crisis, the image of gods was not only widely known on Earth, but even more people like those in Asgard had some knowledge of the gods of Blue Star. But he hadn't considered this direction. Chapter 76, Core U.S. Personnel Defect Directly? Chapter 76, Core American Personnel Defect, 2024-08-19 Author, Good Monster. Chapter 76, Core American Personnel Defect? Equipment testing complete, all system tests activated, the extravehicular environment is in good condition, meeting the requirements for exit. Requesting command approval for exit, Joe Howe's resounding voice echoed from the moon to every corner of Earth. At this moment, millions of households across Earth were watching the live broadcast of China's manned lunar landing online. The Chinese internet was abuzz with excitement. We are about to witness history. I knew it would be a safe bet. Great for our country. Who is the one who started predicting the disaster? Why are you silent now? How much money did your American father give you? Equally excited were the people at the Satellite Command Center. Chief Engineer Zheng Mingyang stared at the large screen before him with excitement. He reached out to straighten his slightly askew glasses, his hand trembling slightly. After the thrilling moment, Zheng Mingyang felt no one in the world could be more deeply moved than he was when he heard the astronauts confirm the situation and request to leave the spacecraft. He knew everyone on the other end of the network was waiting for his voice, waiting for the command to leave. That would be a historic moment. Zheng Yangming took a deep breath, and his deep, firm voice rang out. In 5 seconds, leave the spacecraft. 5, 4, 3, the astronauts and the entire Quanjiu Satellite Command Center excitedly began the countdown across the screen, the sound nearly blowing the roof off the command center. Furthermore, people around the world began counting down in unison. At the same time, the expressions of all the top U.S. officials changed. They stared intently at the live broadcast of the countdown at the command center, their faces as grim as pig livers. Are we really going to watch China's successful manned lunar landing? Are they so obsessed with a manned lunar landing? Are they already certain there are ancient relics? Just then, news arrived from NASA, which had been shirking their urging. Latest intelligence. Our research has revealed that China's manned lunar landing was affected by a lunar magnetic storm. While the crisis has been temporarily resolved, the storm's effects have not yet dissipated, and the moon is not yet ready for spacewalks. Protective suits cannot withstand the effects of a magnetic storm. In fact, no country currently has space technology capable of withstanding such a storm. Our conclusion is that if they truly leave the spacewalk, failure awaits them. After hearing the NASA report, the U.S. high-ranking official's gloomy expression shifted to a beaming expression. What would happen if they did leave the spacewalk? 2 seconds later, NASA responded with a short, single-line message. The black text in the text made the U.S. high-ranking officials gasp. If they leave the warehouse, they'll instantly turn into burnt turkeys. A moment of silence followed, before someone chuckled, and then a chorus of laughter erupted. If that's true, it would be a truly beautiful sight. China, searching for some ethereal, mythical land whose existence we don't even know exists, only turned up like this. Is it worth it? Unaware of the taunts emanating from the shadows of the United States, Chinese netizens were counting down loudly. 3, 2, 1. Leaving the warehouse. Leaving the warehouse. We are about to witness history. Everyone cheered at home, online, and in the streets. Everyone understood the historic significance of China's successful manned lunar landing. It represented China's comprehensive advancement in space technology, surpassing the United States and other advanced nations. It also marked the first step in China's quest for its cosmic roots. China would explore the relics of ancient times, radiating humanity's strongest voice of this era across the vast universe, and demonstrating to the world who truly controlled history. The U.S. brass were also watching the screen. They heard the countdown end and watched the hatch slowly open. Through the smoke, they could vaguely see the astronauts stir and step forward. They watched as the astronauts placed their first footprint on the moon, then the second, the third. What's going on? What about that magnetic storm? The U.S. brass watched helplessly as 4 sturdy, tall astronauts walked step after step across the lunar surface, leaving footprint after footprint, yet nothing seemed out of place. They felt like they were about to be turned into turkeys, not to mention turkeys. Just as the U.S. brass were about to order the NASA brass to be immediately restrained, they froze. The footage zoomed in, giving them a clearer view of the protective suits worn by the 4 astronauts. What was going on? SHIELD Director Pierce, watching the livestream, his face a darkened black. He clutched his chest tightly, the low pressure around him making Nick Fury, who was standing next to him, feel uncomfortable. Nick Fury repeatedly wiped the sweat from his forehead, his eyes fixed on the live broadcast. The 4 astronauts weren't wearing the usual white spacesuits, but rather streamlined silver-white armor. The silver-white armor complemented the lunar surface beautifully. It must be a uniquely Chinese lunar suit. But don't tell me you don't know anything, Pierce said coldly. He stared at Nick Fury and continued his questioning. Aside from the color, this suit is almost identical to Tony Stark's suit. Not just the appearance, but the identical reactor on the chest. What's going on? Why is our country's most advanced and secretive technology appearing on a live broadcast of a Chinese manned lunar landing? Nick Fury remained silent in the face of Pierce's questioning. His gaze fixed on the 4 astronauts, a strange sense of familiarity welling up within him. Speak up. How did our technology get leaked, Director? Bruce Banner, who disappeared a few days ago? Is there any news now? Don't talk nonsense. Answer my question first. Pierce was speaking when he glanced at the live broadcast screen. The figures of the 4 astronauts on it caught his attention for a moment, and even he couldn't help but be stunned. Why did the figures of these 2 astronauts look so familiar? Especially the astronaut walking in the back row. His figure and walking posture in the armor were exactly like Tony Stark. And the person standing next to him looked like Banner. Pierce's hands began to tremble. He originally thought it was a problem of internal information leaks, but now it seems that the core personnel have directly defected? Even if someone told him that the US president secretly worshipped the Monkey King, he would not be more shocked than he is now. Oh my god. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.